Okay, guys, welcome back to the channel. And of course, we're back to our typical news shows where we talk about the trending topics in fashion. So, as you can see from the title, we shall be giving you an update on the Trump tariffs. This is a topic that we actually looked at quite a while ago, but now we actually have the actual figures. So, I thought it would be good to do an update on exactly what is going on with the Trump tariffs. We'll also be looking at how Ozempic is changing the face of the modeling industry and many other topics. So yeah, the voice is deep this early morning. Is my voice deep? That's funny. Today's news, everything is going tits up. I guess you can put it that way. That's definitely one way of putting it, to be honest. That's one way you can see it. Definitely. So yeah, without further ado, I think we should just get straight into it, to be honest. Because as you guys know, the Trump tariffs has hit not just the fashion industry, but actually all industries by storm, including the stock market. I mean, if you look at the S&P 500, there are all these reports that stock prices have gone crazy recently. Look at how much it's dropped. This is on the 2nd of April. And then it just absolutely tanked on the 3rd, and since then the S&P 500 has been tanking. Loads of brands, their stocks have absolutely tanked because of Trump's tariffs. Fashion stocks have also tanked. We've seen the likes of Kering stock tanking, many other conglomerates that stock was tanking. So it was definitely a reckoning day for a lot of industries, not just fashion. Someone's asking me to look at Kering stock. Let's look at Kering stock let's put it on the screen. Okay, it's up today. You have to look at the past 5 days, and then you can see it's down by quite a lot over the past 5 days. But it's up today though. I guess that's a positive sign. Someone saying buy the dip, that's hilarious. Yeah, so anyway, what I wanted to do, there's this amazing article via BBC explaining exactly what the tariffs are. I've already explained why Trump is doing these tariffs and why they are happening. But for people that are new, you might be new, you might have not ever seen my content before. We'll go through it again just so that you can get that level of context. So here it is. So Trump claims that a 10% tariff on all nations and much higher rates of up to 50% on individual countries will boost the US economy and protect jobs. And I think, to pause there, it's a very simplistic way of looking at things. It's ultra simplistic. And that's one thing I don't like about politics, because I've just been observing kind of people's opinions online about what they think about the tariffs, whether they agree with it, whether they disagree. And it tends to be, if you're politically on the left, you just completely disagree. And if you're politically on the right, you're just like, Trump knows what he's doing and everything that Trump does is amazing. So that's the thing I don't like about when we mix issues of politics with like the economy and all that sort of stuff, because people tie emotions into what actually is a very like tangible thing that will affect everyone worldwide. um so I find it really strange how people are so politically blind about things like this. They just stay with like their political party and not even consider anything about it. It's really weird. But when I see things like this, I always think of, where is the money coming from? Who is paying for it? And which companies are given more leeway? Because the whole point of Trump doing these, and I'm sure we'll read this further on in the BBC article, Trump claims that a lot of countries put tariffs on the US, and the US doesn't really put a lot of tariffs on them. So it's balancing the playing field. Also, by putting these massive tariffs, and they've targeted a lot of production hubs for a lot of fashion brands. So by targeting those places, these companies have absolutely no choice but to produce in the US. By producing in the US, by creating factories and infrastructure in the US, what that means is that will lead to more jobs in the US being created, more infrastructure in the US, more money into the US economy. But I think that's really simplistic, because first of all, you cannot build a factory in a day. First of all, you need the planning permission to build a factory. You have to find the land. You have to make sure that the land isn't somewhere that could like affect the surrounding area. There's so much planning that needs to go into it. You have to legally pass all the checks for these factories to build this infrastructure. You have to train loads of staff to learn how to use the machinery in a lot of these factories. You have to, there's just so many things that have to happen. It would literally take years and years and years and years to build the infrastructure. And in the meantime, companies are bleeding. The average American's wallets are bleeding. People from all over the world, their wallets are bleeding. So my question is, who pays for that in the interim? Where is this money coming from in the interim when all these companies are forced into building infrastructure in the US, when these things take so long? It's crazy, to be honest. It's crazy. And that's what I always have to ask, like, where exactly is all of this coming from? But reading on. However, there are warnings that the move could harm the world economy and push up prices for consumers in the US and around the globe. Hasn't that already happened though? Like my American friends, they're complaining about the increase in the price of eggs, amongst other things, right? They're really saying that the eggs have not been great. The eggs have been really expensive recently, so that hasn't been fantastic. Tariffs are taxes charged on goods bought from other countries. Typically, they are a percentage of a product's value. For example, a 25% tariff on a $10 product would mean an additional $2.50 charge. Companies that bring the foreign goods into the country have to pay the tax to the government. And firms can choose to pass on some or all of the cost to customers. Now, this is an interesting conversation I've seen happen in fashion where people are asking, who is going to eat this cost? Is it going to be the company or is it going to be the brand? And I honestly think it depends on the kind of customer base that companies have. So in luxury fashion, I think they're definitely going to pass the cost on to the customer, because luxury fashion customers are less likely to be affected by things like this because they have more money. They tend to be the richer people in society, especially brands like Hermes. Hermes can increase their costs and the waiting list will still be full for their Kellys and the Birkins and stuff like that. So to be very honest, a lot of luxury brands will just pass the cost on to consumers. But for the mid-level brands and the brands that charge even lower prices, they are going to really be strongly affected by these tariffs, to be honest. And they would have to think hard about passing the cost to customers because their whole business model is it being affordable. And once it's not affordable, they basically lose almost their whole customer base. So that's crazy. Now, reading on, why is Trump using tariffs? For decades, Trump has argued that the US should use tariffs to boost its economy. He says they will encourage US consumers to buy more American-made goods, increase the amount of tax raised, and lead to huge levels of investment in the country. So I think that's a very simplistic analysis of how exactly tariffs will just completely change the US economy and everyone's going to be rich. Because why do these luxury brands, or just brands in general, why do they produce in places like Bangladesh or China or Vietnam, Cambodia? Because they are low labor cost markets. And that's how these companies were able to improve their profit margins. So if these companies are now forced into going back to a high labor cost market, it just means that their revenue will increase drastically. It means that their market share will decrease drastically, and therefore these companies overall have less money. So the assumption that all this money is going to go to the US, I think it's a bit simplistic, to be honest. It doesn't actually make that much sense in reality. Like when you really think about it, it really doesn't make sense. There are also other markets that aren't as affected by the tariffs. So let's say luxury markets like Turkey, I've seen their tariffs aren't as high as the likes of like Vietnam, for example. Or trying to think of another country that it wasn't too bad. I know Turkey was definitely one of them. I know some Latin American countries also are known for producing clothing, and they aren't hit with tariffs the same level that like a Vietnam and a China will be. So we might see a lot of luxury brands focusing on producing in the likes of Turkey, and that might actually be really good for the Turkish economy, because the Turkish economy has had serious issues. The last time I was in Turkey, you had to, like, especially if you're a foreigner, they would make you buy stuff with pounds or dollars because their currency was that bad. Like the Turkish lira was really, really bad. I don't know what it's like now, but this could definitely mean a positive thing for the Turkish economy. However, what you need to remember about fashion is different regions specialize in producing different things. Certain countries specialize in knitwear, certain countries specialize in denim. So by forcing countries that don't really have the expertise in certain things to produce it, we might just see the quality of things going down, which newsflash, quality has already gone down. We don't really want more of that, to be honest. I've also seen a lot of people saying that this might be good for sustainability in fashion, but that's a conversation that we'll get to later. But reading on. Trump wants to reduce the gap between the value of goods the US buys from other countries and the value of those it sells to them. He argues that America has been taken advantage of by cheaters and pillaged by foreigners. The US president has also made other demands alongside tariffs. The first announced during his current term targeted China, Mexico, and Canada, after he said he wanted them to do more to stop migrants and illegal drugs reaching the US. Trump has strongly defended his tariffs announcement, but a growing number of influential voices within his Republican Party have joined opposing Democrats and foreign leaders in attacking the measures. Long-standing Trump ally and Daily Wire co-founder Ben Shapiro said they could be economically catastrophic, and that the messaging behind them had been muddled. Yeah, I think, and that's the problem I have with, once again, the political conversations where people are so weird about politics, where they just choose a side and then everything that person says they just follow blindly, that there's no critical thought going into actually what are the effects to the everyday person when these things happen. Like, don't people know that your groceries are going to be more expensive? Everything you buy is going to be more expensive, and your wages aren't going to go up. So that just means it's basically like having some accelerated inflation without your your wages inflating with the inflation. I don't know how people don't understand that. It literally just makes your life worse off. It just makes you worse off as a person in the economy. Let's see, what are Trump's reciprocal tariffs? Trump's minimum 10% tariff on all imports to the US was introduced on the 5th of April. The UK, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia are among the countries this applies to. However, many nations will face much higher tariffs. Yeah, I've talked about most of these tariffs targeting the production hubs of a lot of fashion companies. So yeah, these tariffs include 49% on Cambodian products, 46% on Vietnamese imports, and 20% on the goods from the EU. The 20% on the EU is very interesting because, of course, a lot of luxury brands produce in EU regions. I mean, most luxury brands produce, if not in Turkey and Japan, because a lot of luxury brands produce like their denim in Turkey or Japan. They produce their knitwear in places like Portugal. They produce a lot of their leather goods in Italy, especially. A lot of brands produce in France. All of those regions are going to be affected by these things. So that's going to be a huge, huge issue moving forward for sure. A very, very big issue. Chinese imports could face a 54% tariff and an extra 34% on top of the 20%, which had previously been announced. And that's the thing. So because Trump says one thing and then he announces something else, it's actually really hard as a business to know what region to move to, what region to focus on, what region to invest in, because he can literally turn around the next day and say, we're just going to increase it by 10%, which he has shown that he will do that. Because when we covered the Trump tariffs and what he was saying just a few weeks ago, it's so different to the tariffs he actually put in place. Like, the tariffs he puts in place are way worse than what he was saying when he was sort of talking about them. So you don't actually know what to expect. So it's hard for companies to plan, including American companies. So this narrative that Trump is like, yeah, everything I do is to help American companies, I personally don't buy it. I think what he's doing is actually negatively affecting American companies, and they have to pass on this cost to their consumers, and that might lead to them just losing their consumers completely. So when you look at stuff like this, for example, and I hope more of this happens, where you have companies literally adding a tariff surcharge so consumers actually know. Let me just move my screen to the other side. So consumers can actually tell what exactly the price increase is caused by. So here you can see in this order, there's a $44.09 increase on this order just based on the tariffs, to be honest. So we'll see more of that. And I think it's great for companies to do that, where they make it very clear as to why there's a big price increase in what they are selling. Said, dude, you have zero specialization in economics, so it makes no sense that you're lecturing on it. None of our manufacturers make goods in America. That's the whole point. So building the infrastructure is not free. Like, in a lot of these what you don't understand is that, like, the money has to come from somewhere, right? So when you look at like how much it actually costs to build the infrastructure, and the fact that the government won't be that heavily involved in paying for these things, is damn near impossible. How does a company invest millions and millions and millions and millions, sometimes even close to billions, in infrastructure in certain regions that they produce in, and then at the drop of a bucket, they have to change that and then invest the same millions and millions and millions into America again after they've invested it elsewhere? That doesn't make any economical sense. You don't need an economics degree to understand that that doesn't make sense. And, you know, where exactly is the money coming from? Like, it's just common sense. It's literally just common sense. That's all it is. Yeah. So that's what I was alluding to earlier. A lot of people just sometimes, with the political thing, follow their politics blindly without actually critically thinking about anything. But let's read on. Let's read on. However, China said in response that it would bring in a 34% retaliatory tariff on US goods. Trump then threatened to introduce a further 50% tariff on China, meaning 104% tariff on some products. China has vowed to fight to the end. White House officials described the higher tariffs on countries Trump called the worst offenders as reciprocal. Reciprocal could mean they were based on what countries already charged the US in form of existing tariffs, plus non-tariff barriers such as regulations. However, this is not what has happened for all the countries on the list. Instead, the tariff rate was calculated on the basis that it would eliminate the US goods trade deficit within each country. Some countries, including the UK, have had tariffs applied even though they buy more from the US than they sell to it. And so this is a key point here, that some countries, including the UK, have had tariffs applied even though they buy more from the US than sell to it. So, for example, their claim that the tariffs that they put on is specifically to make up for the trade deficit. Two reasons why it doesn't make sense. You have it on the UK, where literally in the UK, they buy more from the US than they sell to it. So saying that you're doing that one to, you know, balance the trade deficit doesn't make sense. Also, this only works on the assumption that everything stays the same, which it won't. So many people are going to do things in reaction to the tariffs, and then the market changes completely. And when the market changes completely, the deficits change completely also. So to be like, yeah, we're perfectly calculating the tariffs based on balancing the deficit, and then companies are like, well, you want to put tariffs on us, we're just going to move our production here or move it there, then it completely changes the landscape of the deficit. So then you have to do it again, I guess, and then the market reacts, then you do it again, then the market reacts, and it's just going to be a constant thing that keeps on going as the market keeps reacting. It's so stupid to think that you can just make tariffs once and the market is going to stay completely the same and no one's going to change where they produce or change in response to the tariffs being announced. It's so simplistic. Like, it actually doesn't make any sense. But reading on. Will prices go up for US consumers? Many economists expect tariffs to push up prices across a range of imported goods as firms pass on some or all of their increased costs. The products affected could include everything from clothing to coffee and alcohol to electronics. Some firms may also decide to import fewer foreign goods, which could make those which are available more expensive. The price of goods manufactured in the US using imported components may also rise. For example, car parts typically cross the US, Mexican, and Canadian borders multiple times before a vehicle is completely assembled. This is interesting. So you've got the powdered aluminium sent from Tennessee, turned into rods in Pennsylvania. The rods are shaped and polished in Canada, sent directly to Mexico for assembly into pistons, and then the pistons become part of an engine in Michigan. So, based on the tariffs, right, for this to actually work, and this is why, going back to the comment that someone said earlier, it actually doesn't make any sense. So, in Canada, where the rods are shaped and polished, you need to move that step into the US, and then the assembly where these things are assembled into pistons in Mexico. The reason why it's assembled to pistons in Mexico is because it's a cheaper labor market. You have to also move this to the US. Who is paying for these two steps in the automotive industry to both be moved into the US? And do we know how much this is going to cost the massive American companies that produce cars in the US? Who exactly is paying for that, and how much will it cost? And can they even afford to pay for that? You have so many companies that are already struggling. I mean, General Motors, we know the issues that they are having. Can they afford to move those into the US? And that's what I mean. Like, a lot of people just kind of blindly supporting things that they haven't really thought about in any regard. But reading on, car prices had already been expected to increase as a result of earlier tariffs. The cost of a car made using parts from Mexico and Canada alone, the cost of a car made using parts from Mexico and Canada alone could rise by $4,000 to $10,000, depending on the vehicle. The measures could also damage the US economy. The chance of a recession rose to 50% after Trump's announcement on new tariffs. And Trump's top officials have repeatedly played down recession fears and insisted that the tariffs would be implemented as planned. The stock markets, we don't even need to read this part. We know exactly what has happened since the stock market, it was announced the stock markets have completely tanked across the board. This is obviously because I'm based in the UK. How will it affect the UK? So the UK exported around £58 billion of goods to the US in 2024, mainly cars, machinery, and pharmaceuticals. It was already due to be affected by the earlier tariffs targeting steel, aluminium, and car imports, or aluminum, as my Americans in the chat say. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said clearly there will be an economic impact from the 10% tariff. However, he said US-UK trade talks are ongoing and that he will fight for the best deal for Britain. And once again, this is what I mean. Those figures and those tariffs that they've put on regions, so much of the market is liable to change that it literally doesn't make sense for them to say, oh, we've perfectly calculated how we can balance the trade deficit. That literally doesn't make sense. There's no such thing as a perfect calculation for a trade deficit, unless you just assume that everything stays the same, which everyone knows it won't. So let's see. Top 5 UK goods exports to the US. Cars, 9 billion. Pharmaceutical products, 6.6 billion. Mechanical power generators, aircrafts. Yeah, I know a lot of the aircrafts that we export to the US are military aircrafts, because I know that we produce and export a lot of weapons to the US. That's guns, that's aircrafts, commercial and military aircraft. So that I'm definitely aware of. Obviously, cars too. We produce a lot of cars. We're reading on. How have other countries responded to the Trump tariffs? So the EU said the consequences will be dire for millions of people around the globe. Canada announced a 25% tariff on US vehicles. In Italy, they're saying that they're going to work towards a deal to prevent a trade war. In Ireland, they're saying there's no justification for the tariffs. In Australia, they're saying This is not the act of a friend. In South Korea, they're saying the global trade war has become a reality. And so this is what I'm really interested in, to see kind of all the new tariffs on all the different countries and see exactly what regions were targeted. So as you can see, 20% on the EU. We've talked about this already. Big impact on luxury brands that produce all around the EU, from Italy to France to Portugal. So many companies produce in those regions. Of course, China, we knew that was coming already. The US and China have kind of had this tit for tat going on for a while now, so that was to be expected. You've got a 24% tariff on Japan, which is also a big hub for production, especially when it comes to denim. Most luxury brands produce their denim in Japan. That's going to be really crazy. You're going to see a 46% tariff on Vietnam. I just really want to know, and I'm just curious to know how exactly they're going to bring the expertise, the skills, the infrastructure, and build that quick enough in Vietnam for it not to affect American companies like a lot. Because right now they're bleeding. In the meantime, and that's the problem, like in the meantime, while all these trade deals are being made and, you know, everyone is trying to figure out where exactly they produce, because Trump can change the tariffs at any point in time, they're losing money in the meantime, by the way. They don't, everything is not on pause. They can't just pause their brand and then revisit it in 2 years when supposedly infrastructure has been built. So, you know, we're going to have to see, and I'm going to be looking very curiously to see exactly how things are going to change. You've got 26% on South Korea, Taiwan, 32%. That makes a lot of sense. Although, something that's weird about this massive tariff on Taiwan, which is why I do want to see what exceptions Trump will make, because he will have to make exceptions eventually. Taiwan is a big region for the US, because the US imports a lot of things from Taiwan, like a lot, especially when it comes to like the tech company, a lot of the microchips. And that's a big reason actually why the US fights wars on behalf of Taiwan against China, because they want to, you know, actually be a part of the microchips and, you know, continue to trade with Taiwan. And if China has too much, you know, power and strength over Taiwan, then the US won't get all those favorable deals. So that's actually strange to see that 32% tariff on Taiwan. That's odd. India is another big region for production in the fashion industry. Thailand is also a big region that's affected. Algeria, 30%. Interesting. Angola, 32%. Bangladesh, another huge region. Huge region. So that'll be interesting to see. That'll be interesting. Jude is saying we are reliant on Taiwan for chips, which is why we're moving manufacturing to the US, i.e. the CHIPS Act. Yes, but once again, and the problem with these kind of conversations is, oh yeah, this is why we're moving production. Okay. How long will that take? How much does that cost? These are the questions you need to ask. And if you can't answer them, how much does it cost to move the infrastructure completely from Taiwan to the US so that the US is not reliant on Taiwan for the chips? How long will that take? How much will that cost? The reason why these two questions need to be answered is because when you think about it, depending on how long this takes, that's how long these companies have to try and survive while these tariffs are super high. Otherwise, they fold. So unless you can answer those questions, billions, and we've already built 2 major plants, it's fully in process. Yes, it's in process. It's in process. It's literally in process, though. Yeah, he is misrepresenting the CHIPS Act. It was started by Biden and killed by Trump. Yeah, exactly. The CHIP Act was halted by Trump too. He's actively stopping us from even subsidizing the US to build our own chip factories. And that's why, like I've said, you have to ask these questions. And until these questions can be answered, and I find it quite funny because the people that argue for these things are probably the most affected. Like the people that are like, oh, it's already in place, it's going to be built. Meanwhile, your cars are going to cost double. You won't be able to afford a car. You literally won't be able to afford a car yourself. um, a lot of your American companies will fold in the meantime while they're building this infrastructure that is supposedly being promised. And you know the way that things happen. When governments say, oh, this infrastructure will be built in 4 years, it actually means 8 to 10 years, to be very honest with you. That's just how these things work. Who do you think will be more affected, fast fashion or luxury fashion? Definitely fast fashion for sure. And we've seen so many fast fashion brands already folding anyway. One good thing I think that is coming out of all of this is sustainability, and it's going to stifle the impact of Shein and Temu, because of course they have been taking advantage of that de minimis loophole where orders below $800 aren't taxed the same. Therefore, they could just decimate the market by just importing and exporting really cheap goods. And that's how they were able to outperform a lot of the fast fashion brands globally, but in the US too. And that's why you see a lot of these fast fashion brands closing down. We've talked about Forever 21 recently. A lot of other fast fashion brands have really suffered. So that's a good thing, that this is going to really stifle the growth of those companies, because I think that their practices are horrible. They produce clothing that is terrible for the environment. A lot of it is going to end up in landfills. It leads to a lot of waste globally. So that's a definite positive to come out of all of this, to be honest. Back to repeating clothes like normal people, less pollution too. That's the thing. That's the thing. That's the thing. But I don't think it's going to. I don't know if it's going to change consumer spending or consumer, just consumer actions, to be honest, because if we use a recent case study to try and inform us on how this is going to go, COVID. COVID was a time of economic downturn. Many people suffered. A lot of people were like, yeah, especially in the fashion industry, they were like, we're going to slow down. Fashion needs to slow down. Fashion, we need to have a reckoning day in fashion. We need to stop overproducing. We need to change the way we produce. And the second that COVID ended and stuff started to rise again economically, people started to get jobs again, consumers went back to normal. So I don't know if consumer spending really changes that much in the long term. It might change in the short term, but I don't know if after people, once the effects of this have been balanced out and people get used to it and all the companies have pivoted, people are just going to go back to normal, to be honest. People are just going to produce as normal, overproduce as normal, and everything will, be that way, to be honest. RIP all the Shein stores that opened in California. To be fair, I'm very happy that this is going to be a rough time for Shein. That's the one positive out of all of this. The Chinese fast fashion brands, they need to be destroyed. Honestly, they need to be decimated, removed from the planet. They need to be ceased from producing. They shouldn't be allowed to produce clothing. So that's the one big positive out of all of this. The greatest effects will be on the US dollar and trade agreements in the future. The euro will be more willing to partner with China at this rate. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure, for sure, for sure. And obviously, the US, you can't downplay the impact and the power of the US. The US is extremely important to the global economy, but so is China. And if the US forces the hand of the likes of the EU, many other big regions that are also really important, then they will just sidestep and all make deals with China, and that will just void the impact of the US on the economy. I think these decisions are being made based on an assumption that so many countries will continue to be trade allies with the US and they won't switch gears and work with China more and stuff like that. Big assumptions, to be honest. Jennifer says, I think it depends on how deep the recession is. If people go right back to bad habits, that is true, to be honest. That's very true. If the recession is as deep as the Great Depression, that took 2 generations to change. True. Do you think this will change the fashion direction? Will people buy more tops or bottoms? Is formal wear going to be important in time of economic hardship? So, what I think will happen, to be honest, is I think so. My thought process is that considering certain regions are less affected than others, and I can imagine that a lot of companies are just going to move to countries that are less affected. So I said, countries like Turkey, that is very known for producing high quality goods. We're going to see a lot of companies producing more there. However, Turkey specializes in very specific things like denim and sometimes knitwear and stuff like that. So we might just see brands changing what they produce entirely. So let's say in Vietnam, there's more like futuristic technology in terms of sportswear, which is actually how it is. We're just going to see brands do less of this futuristic fashion forward sportswear and just make more knitwear and denim instead. So I think the kind of garments that people produce, especially in the short term, until they can work out exactly how they're going to deal with these tariffs, I think that's exactly what's going to happen moving forward. This is also a thing that I've seen going on. So I've seen a lot of Canadians, especially, boycott a lot of American brands and companies. I've seen in Canada a really big movement of people trying their best not to produce, not to consume American goods and services, which is interesting. We'll see if that will have an impact on the American economy. I don't really think it's going to have that much of an impact, to be honest. The American economy is humongous. But yeah. Avoid the impact is a massive overstatement. Yeah, obviously I'm exaggerating. What I mean by avoid the impact is like it will reduce the impact of the American economy on the rest of the world if people are less reliant on it or American imports and exports. Do you think this will help move more jobs and manufacturing to the US, or is Trump just killing America day by day? I think we just need to see. So obviously, I've spoken about my analysis and like questions. I've posed questions that need to be answered that I don't think anyone has the answers to, even though people claim they do. But I think we just need to see how it plans out, what trade deals people actually sign. This is really just an update on what has happened. We need to observe kind of where the markets go. What a lot of countries, haven't even retaliated yet. They are planning to. So we need to see what they do in retaliation and how that affects the US economy. So, we just need to see. We just need to see. He's talking about running for the third time. That's who you're dealing with. Laws don't exist. Approval ratings don't exist. You have someone in the chat that's a specimen who votes in. Oh my god. I don't think anyone should be judged for supporting Trump or whatever. In terms of like, we're in a free world. People are, free to have whatever political leanings that they have. My issue is just if you're a Trump supporter, you have to actually answer the questions I'm posing. Otherwise, what exactly are you fighting for if you don't even know what this thing is going to cost, how long it's going to take to build the infrastructure, and how do you think companies will survive in the interim? It's having an impact on people, should definitely be judged for their tourism already. Are you existing in the UK? You don't understand how bad it is in here. You haven't talked to them. What are you talking about? Trump supporters? I think it also depends because I think on both sides. Once again, I consider myself politically a centrist, right? And as someone that observes politics, on the left and on the right, there are people that are extreme. There are people that I see on the left that have they say things and you're like, that makes no sense. And then there's people on the right that say things and you're like, that makes no sense. So I don't want to push a narrative where it's like, only this side can ever be wrong and this side is always right every single time, because that's not really a critical way of seeing things, to be honest. And I like, on at least on my channel, to promote, don't just surround yourself with opinions that agree with your worldview. You might learn something by speaking to someone from a different political leaning. So, try to be open-minded, guys. Let's see. How do you see these tariffs affecting Lesotho? The country was hit with 99% tariffs, and they mostly produce textiles for the US. Like, there's no reason but just to bully/exploit the country. Well, they claim that they will be able to move all of that production to the US, which I definitely don't agree with. So yeah, I just think it's not, going to work. Someone is saying you forgot about the social policies of Trump supporters. Yeah, so obviously now we're talking about economics. If you look at like the social policies, then obviously it makes sense why you would or wouldn't support him based on how that affects you personally. So for example, I can imagine that, let's say you're part of the trans community, obviously you wouldn't support Trump, because that's basically like supporting what literally works against your existence and is fighting to be against your existence. So in that case, obviously it makes sense. But if we're talking about economics, that's a totally different conversation, which is the conversation we're having right now. So yeah, there's no left in the US. They're center right at most. I don't agree with that. I think there's a left in the US. Since NYC is a major fashion hub in the US, do you think international brands will stop promoting their products in New York? No, because once again, going back to the importance of America on the luxury market, when you look at financial reports and you look at like what the markets are when they divide it by markets, the US is still a massive share. Yes, Asia makes up the lion's share of consumers for most of these luxury companies, but the US does have a big chunk. There's a lot of money in the US. Companies can't just, wake up one day and be like, yeah, we're just going to stop promoting our products in the US. That wouldn't make any sense, especially not in the short term, to be honest. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to lose too much money, especially the bigger conglomerates. That wouldn't make any sense for them at all. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, if I'm very honest with you. Let me show you guys something. I want to show you guys just so you can see some of these luxury companies, like how much of their market share is actually in the US. So you can have a very clear understanding that the US is still very important for most luxury brands, if not all. Let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. I personally believe the quality will go up and fast fashion will die down. Based on production going where? Based on production going where? I work in NYC fashion, specifically in handbags, and it's a complete free fall. Damn. Damn, that's crazy. Yeah, I just find it really fascinating that, because when you look at like things like this, right, like the tariffs, you have to see it from all angles, right? You have to see it from how will this affect the US economy if this country does that. But from Trump supporters, unfortunately, from what I've seen from a lot of them are going on the assumption that everything that Trump is doing is a positive and there could be no drawbacks, when so many well-respected economic analysts are saying that it could lead to a recession, it could decimate the US economy, it could really affect very specific industries like the automotive industry, the fashion industry, especially if they can't build the infrastructure in the US quick enough. So I just find it weird that a lot of the conversations is very much either it's the perfect thing and any other opinion is dumb, or nothing's going to work. I think some things could work, some things might not. But I think if we're talking about the fashion industry specifically, which is what I focus on, I think it's a net negative overall for sure. It's definitely a net negative for the fashion industry. And I think the fashion industry is going to be heavily affected. Io, interesting to hear you talk from a Euro/UK perspective. Being here in Canada and seeing it all so close is mind-blowing. Yeah, I can imagine, to be honest. I can really imagine. It's blind faith. They believe in Trump and have low tolerance for dissent. I just think it's weird because a lot of these tariffs, and I said this before, I'll say it again, they are going under an assumption that other countries don't have the power to really affect the outcome of the US economy. It's going based on the assumption that we're just going to impose these tariffs on these countries, and they basically have no choice but to start producing in the US. And when it could backfire is if they don't start producing in the US, they don't start building infrastructure in the US, that will really backfire, like seriously backfire. And then it would affect US companies that are mainly based in the US that are forced into being the ones that have to spend all the money because other companies aren't. So yeah. Klarna's business about to start booming. That's funny. Oh my god, this is crazy. America needs a hard left president who will tell poor people that they're stupid. Jesus Christ, Luke. What the hell? I don't really know where you're going with this, Luke. However, if you're talking about the US, what I've observed in the US is it's kind of like a strange, I think it's like a US thing. And you guys that are American in the chat, let me know if my analysis is correct. But from what I've analyzed, because I don't know where Luke is going at with that, but let me say what I think he's alluding to. So in the US, a lot of working class Americans vote and fight for things that are against their best interest. And from someone from the UK observing it, it's always really weird. Like, Americans will fight against, like, the government paying for healthcare, but working class Americans can't afford healthcare. And working class Americans can't even take an ambulance. Like in the US, a lot of people, if someone shoots them in the leg or they're in the middle of, a shooting, which happens in a lot of working class areas in the US, they can't even call an ambulance because they can't afford it. So they have to find a way to get to the hospital one way or another. Or sometimes they don't even go to the hospital. They kind of just have to find a way to kind of deal with it. There's people that have broken legs and it's never really fixed because they can't afford the medical bills. But then they actively fight against policies that would mean that wouldn't be the case in the future. So observing the US, I think that's what Luke is alluding to. The way he said it is just not the way I would say it. Like he said, what did he say? He said, what did he say exactly? Tell poor people that they are stupid. That's insane, the way it's worded. But a lot, and not even just that, I think, so from what I've observed, a lot of working class Americans fight for policies that are under the assumption that they'll be rich in the future. So you'll see, like, the typical working class American will fight for policies that favor the middle class and the upper class because they are under a pretense that very soon, because it's the American dream, right? They're under the pretense that one day, very soon, I shall be part of the middle class or the upper class. So therefore, I'm going to fight for policies that benefit them because I'm going to be a part of that class moving forward. So that's something I've observed, but that's my outside looking in observation. But Americans in the chat, let me know. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you think about that. Let me see, because I know most of my audience is American, so you guys would know more than me. That's just kind of my opinion. Let's see. It's almost certainly a problem of a lack of education, common miseducation. That's affirmed by these right-wing populist messages. Okay, let's go on. It's not the people necessarily. They are bombarded with propaganda by traditional media and social media. Let's see. That sounds like something you read on TikTok. Americans have much more disposable income than most Europeans. Oh my god, Jude. Americans have let me respond to this. Americans are definitely richer. Well, the average American, I think, has more money than the average European for sure. As someone that's based in the UK, I just think that most Americans are just rich. However, that doesn't really tally, even though on paper they have more disposable income. If the cost of living is so high because you have to pay for health insurance and like all these things, it ends up balancing out very quickly. So just because you have more disposable income, it doesn't really, because when they do these disposable income, like when you look at it, like how they calculate disposable income, it doesn't take into account a lot of medical fees and stuff like that. And that's where the disparity is, and that's what balances the deficit. But let me read what you guys are saying. What my fellow Americans are saying in the chat about my analysis. So on one front, someone earlier said that emergency visits are free in the US, and now someone is saying emergency visits are not free in the US. They cost several thousands, and even with insurance, it will at minimum cost you 1K out of pocket. So Americans are not even in agreement as to what it costs in terms of emergencies in the US. My understanding is that it costs money. It's not free. But let's see. Let's see what else you guys are saying. Let's understand. The reasoning is I always hear is people don't want taxes increased to pay for these programs, even though they stand to directly benefit. Interesting. 50% of Americans have less than $500 in their savings account. That's also true. Yes, the American cost of living is insane. That's facts. America definitely pays a lot more than, say, the UK on average. Yeah, exactly. Which is why I was like, you can earn more, but if it costs more, it's basically the same thing. Americans have bad money management and an issue with over-consuming. I mentioned this earlier, right? That what surprises me about the US is how easy it is to access credit. Like, I have so many friends in the US, and when they tell me how easy it is to access like really high levels of credit, I'm like, wow, that's insane. Like in the UK, you wouldn't just be given access to crazy amounts of credit like that. Let's see. The thing about American politics at the moment is that whether people want to admit it or not, the Heritage Foundation has unfortunately established a foothold in the White House, which is very scary for everyone. Let's see. In the US, we have a long history of propaganda against left-wing movements, Red Scare, proxy wars, assassinations of communist groups, etc. And the average American carries more debt than most Europeans. America's weird when it comes to other countries' mentality is around stay out of my way, but that does bite us in the arse a lot. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck, no matter if you live in an apartment or a gated community. Someone is saying quality of life is way better in Europe than in America. I feel like I started an America versus Europe war. That's not my intention. However, it's just an observation because I was basically alluding to what Luke said in the chat. That's kind of what I thought he meant, right? There'll be many more policies that don't make sense in the coming months and years, like abolishing the Department of Education. Yeah, that's also another thing. Like, reducing funding in the education system is a bit crazy, but conversation for another day. Right. Medical bankruptcy is a foreign concept in Europe, but it's the most common form of bankruptcy in the US. I mean, even if you look at socially, for example, there's obviously a very big case when it comes to Luigi Mangione, which has opened conversations around the healthcare system in the US and kind of the effect of it and why it should be changed, and why in certain aspects is inhumane that, you know, people's safety and ability to live comfortably and have access to good healthcare is weighing on, you know, insurance companies that can, at the drop of a bucket, just refuse to pay out for whatever reason that they choose. That's like a massive conversation being had in the US right now. Jennifer says it is absolutely not free and hospitals will bill you forever. I'm going with Jennifer because Jennifer has been in the US for a very long time and also one of my close friends. So I trust her that the Americans earlier were claiming that emergencies are free in the US, which is definitely not my understanding. And it's not like I haven't been to I've been to the US like 15 times. I've been to the country and seen things myself, right? It's not like I'm just sat in the UK and I've never been to the US and I don't know anything about the US, right? I feel like I'm so behind on the comments. Let me just see if I can catch up and then we can go to the next topic. I just want to see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Also, the state subsidies certain public welfare programs, but the citizens complain about the taxes. Like some hospitals don't prioritize those on the state insurance versus private. Interesting. Yes, let's go on to cringe athlete fashion. If you guys want me to talk more about the tariffs, I don't mind. I don't mind at all. I mean, we can continue going on. I mean, 73% of Americans expect a price surge under the Trump tariffs. Of course, 57% of Americans oppose the new tariffs. You have 52% of people that agree with Trump's trade partners that they take advantage of the US. And then half of the people believe that the short-term pain will make the US stronger long-term, which is interesting. To see kind of what people's opinions are. I'd love to see a poll, maybe like a year from now, on the same topics, just to see how, because it's similar to like, you know, the UK, right? Where the polls pre-Brexit and post-Brexit completely different. Like completely different, to be honest. Also, by the way, this is something I agree with about Americans' gripe with certain taxes being used to like fund healthcare and stuff like that. I think this is like a genuine concern that a lot of Americans have, where it's like, okay, if we are taxed more and that money is going to healthcare, how is that money going to be spent, and is it going to be spent efficiently? Sorry, because if it's not spent efficiently, we're basically paying more to not get what we are paying for. I do think that's definitely like a valid concern. It's definitely valid. As a clip from a number of years ago of Trump on Letterman as a guest promoting his clothing line, the signs were there, folks. The signs were there. Yeah, I'm not taking the polls as fact. Polls are just kind of what people think based on what they've read or, you know, what they've consumed. But I think it's fascinating to know kind of how people think and then how their opinion changes based on things that change in the economy. So let's see. But reading on, just based on the polls, I want to see what some people have said. Some 39% of respondents supported the new tariffs, and 52% said they agreed with the Trump administration's argument that other countries have been taking advantage of the US when it comes to international trade. Trump frequently cites that view as a reason to enact new trade barriers, saying they will lead to a boom in US manufacturing. 42% of respondents said that they disagreed with that view. Americans have mostly split along partisan lines on whether higher tariffs are a good idea. Half of respondents, including almost all Republicans, said they agreed with a statement that Any short economic pain is worth it to make the US stronger in the long term. The other half, including almost all Democrats, disagreed. This is exactly what I was talking about, where a lot of people just stick with their political leanings and just stay there. Because that's quite funny. All Republicans basically are like, it's good. And all Democrats are like, it's bad. That's typical. That's typical. Another great article that's great to check out via BOF is this graph, which shows how luxury stocks have dropped following Trump's announcement. So you can see LVMH, Richemont, and Kering, all of them tanked. Obviously, Kering was the worst out of all of them, to be honest. Kering has been... I feel it for Kering, because Kering has just seen it go from bad to worse. Their stock shares went down based on the terrible performance of Gucci and the announcement of their 2024 financial report, and now the tariffs, and it's gone even lower, and it just keeps going lower. It's sad. It's sad. I think that Demna, being the creative director of Gucci, is insane. Like, the Kering's future is literally weighing on his shoulders, which is crazy to say, which is so much responsibility, but it kind of is, to be honest. It really, really is. It really, really is. Let me read a few more comments and then we'll move on to the next topic, because we've been talking about this for over an hour, which is insane. I get that he wants a rise in US manufacturing, but why not doing it slowly, giving companies some time? Why should this be so rapidly done? Yeah, I'm with you on this. I think normally if you want to implement this change, what he should have done, I think the best way to do it would have been to tell people the tariffs that you're putting in place, and then give companies 6 months to a year to make their necessary changes before the tariffs, are put in place, rather than just kind of doing it so quickly. Because normally when you do things quickly, it means not that much thought has gone into it, to be very honest. And then this is true because he has only 4 years. There's no long-term politics. So I've talked about this before. We're talking a lot about politics, not so much about fashion, but I've talked a lot about this before. But one of my reasons for being a centrist is that, my issue with the way that politics, is just in general, is that a lot of presidents, a lot of leaders, they have terms. And when you have terms, you want to kind of make your mark and, imprint your legacy in the 4 years that you have or whatever. And so there's no continuity with a lot of policies. It's normally just this person comes in, and especially if they're from a political party that opposes the political party that was just in power, I think most countries would benefit from continuity in a lot of policies, them fine-tuning a lot of things, but that doesn't happen in a lot of political systems, because it's just removing this policy and bringing in new ones for 4 years, and then removing those, and then bringing in new ones for 4 years. So nothing good ever comes from it. Nothing is built upon for years and years and years and years and years, and it doesn't do anyone any good. So my overall frustration with just political parties and political systems, that really annoys me. I really don't like that. I hate that, to be honest. We are in this mess because the Republicans that voted for Trump are uneducated. Damn. I think some Trump voters are educated. I don't think all of them are uneducated. I don't like this opinion that, if you support so-and-so person, you just have no common sense, or you're not smart. Some people just vote in their best interest. Some people voted for Trump because they own big businesses and they know that Trump favors business. Well, not with the tariffs, but for the most part, Trump favors businesses. He puts things in place that benefits business and commerce. So if you run a big business, you're just voted. You're just voting in your best interest. It's very very selfish voting, which is what voting is. Like you vote for your selfish goals, I guess. So I don't think those people are stupid. I think those people are very educated. They read the reports actually, and they voted for Trump because it's in their best interest. But yeah, I think a lot of people that voted for Trump, though, on the flip side, definitely voted against their own personal interest, but they don't actually realize that. But I wouldn't say all of Trump supporters. I wouldn't say that. That's class solidarity. Yeah, there's no such thing. There is no such thing, to be honest. There's completely no such thing. No such thing. Yes, people are very selfish in the way that they vote. I don't think a lot of people vote for the greater good. Some people do, but I don't think most people do. Most people vote for their own personal reasons, and sometimes it backfires because they don't do their research properly. Someone said most Republicans are racist. Probably. Which is why, once again, I still think that people are still voting for their own personal reasons, right? So I can draw parallels to UK politics with US politics. So I can imagine that a lot of Republicans voted for Trump because, let's say, a lot of them are racist. So they are very supportive of, get the immigrants out, which is like a similar narrative to the UK, without considering any of the economic drawbacks to what they were fighting for. So a good example, drawing parallels to the UK, a lot of people voted for Brexit because it's all about my Britain, my England. We control the borders, blah, blah, blah. Without considering like the economic impact that Brexit would have. And once Brexit happened, so many companies were on their knees. So many companies left the UK. The UK has seen a record number of millionaires leave the UK, which is like creating a big deficit in terms of taxes and stuff like that. And a lot of that is to do with Brexit and businesses being more advantageous operating in the EU. We saw a lot of companies move their production to Ireland because Ireland is part of the EU for trade purposes. So once again, people vote for their own personal reasons, but a lot of people just don't look at the bigger picture or consider like the economic impact because they're just thinking about, get the immigrants out and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of what happens in politics. But that we see that all the time. It happens so often. It happened in the UK. It's happening in many other countries. It's going to happen in the US. So it's just kind of it's kind of what happens. It's kind of what happens. But anyway, moving on, guys. Moving on. Let's move into the next topic. We can talk about politics the next time we look at Trump, because Trump is definitely going to do something else in a week or so, and I'm going to be back here talking about it. But moving on, we have a very interesting topic, and this is a topic talking about the impact that Ozempic has had on the plus size industry. Now, this is very interesting because I think that Ozempic has kind of hit the fashion industry and just culture by storm. Loads of celebrities have lost weight using Ozempic, and it's kind of, it's kind of changed our mindset on a lot of movements that people had and the way that people used to think about, weight and body positivity. And it's almost like shifted the conversation around it, which I found really fascinating to like observe. But reading the article, it says how Ozempic killed our catwalk careers by a plus size model. After a stretch of supporting bigger women, Felicity Hayward said brands are now dropping bigger models and turning the clock back to the skinny naughties. Now, something I will say, first of all, Felicity Hayward is a really, really famous plus size model. I've seen a lot of her like campaigns and stuff. Really, really famous, really, really well known. I'm quite surprised that someone of her size would be like hugely affected, because normally, even though yes, the plus size modeling industry is very performative in the way that luxury fashion uses it, in the sense that luxury fashion is always like, yeah, let's be body positive, but then they only have like a rotation of like 3 models that they always use. So they either use Paloma, Ashley Graham, or Felicity, and that's about it. They just have them in rotation, and like no one else has a look in. So I would have thought that she wouldn't be affected, because they always need like 2 or 3 that they can rotate. Because once again, like I've said, I don't think the luxury fashion industry actually cares. It's just like all really performative. Another thing I thought when I first saw this article was, yeah, Precious Lee also, that's true. That's very true. Precious Lee is also in that rotation. So I wouldn't think that any of them would be affected, because they still need at least some, right? And those are like the mainstream ones. However, first thing I thought is that in general, modeling is one of those jobs that isn't, a forever job. Like if you're a model, you should know that you're not going to have that job forever. Like there's a ticking clock on that career as a model. The only time that you can be a model for a lifetime is if you're like a supermodel. Like I'm talking Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss level. Then yes, you can be a model in your 60s, and you're so iconic that you can literally be on the runway at 70 and no one cares. But for most people, for us normies, for 99.99999% of models, they're going to be models for max 5 years, and then they need to find a different career. So based on that, in general, you should have like a plan B as a model. If you're a model right now, if you're watching this, you should have a plan B as a model. If you ever become a mainstream model, start a beauty brand like all of them do, make bank, and set off into the sunset, because modeling is not a forever job. So I find it really weird how in the article I saw a lot of plus size models complaining more so about the fact they don't have a job, when I'm like, to be fair, in any kind of modeling, you should literally have a plan B, to be very honest with you. You should not think that because you have a job today, you have a job tomorrow. Modeling is one of those jobs where it's like, I've seen it because I've worked in fashion for so long. It doesn't last. It really doesn't last unless you're like the top 0.0001%. Like if you're one of the, the Precious Lees or the Kate Mosses, or you're an Adut Aketch or a Paloma, or you have to be that level of model for it to have longevity. If you're not one of those, it won't work. It just won't work. Exactly. Modeling is cutthroat. I know people that have been in one campaign and then they've never had a job after that. Literally, that's it. But reading on in the article, I never planned to be a model growing up because I thought that was a job exclusively for thin people. As a size 20, my body didn't qualify, so modeling had never even crossed my mind. But in 2011, when I was 22, living in London and working at a pub in Hackney, an opportunity came unexpectedly. One night during my shift, a famous photographer called Miles Aldridge approached me and asked if I would pose as Anna Nicole Smith in a photo shoot. I had a photography degree and was a huge fan of his, so I immediately said yes. That photo shoot changed my life. Besides Sophie Dahl, who was a size 12, plus size models didn't exist back then. Aldridge's shoot was groundbreaking and our pictures went viral. A few days later, I received an email offering representation from Storm Management. That's a huge modeling agency for people that don't know. The modeling agency that discovered Kate Moss and developed the careers of Lily Cole, Cara Delevingne, and Cindy Crawford. I didn't reply for 2 weeks because I thought I was being pranked. There was no way the agency, known for its roster of size 0 supermodels, could be asking me to work with it. But then I replied, maybe things were changing. I thought optimistically. So, first of all, that's so hilarious that they have like an I love Ozempic look on the runway. That's insane. But first of all, also, yes, Alec Weck is sensational as a model, by the way. She is. That's a crazy tank top, considering the article and what we're talking about. First of all, I do think that almost everything the luxury fashion industry does is performative. If people actually think that the luxury fashion industry cared about body inclusivity, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the luxury fashion industry is full of people like Karl Lagerfeld that literally fat shamed Adele, to people that are obsessed with losing weight. Like, it's literally toxic in fashion. I've literally seen models faint on set because they haven't eaten, because they need to be a certain waist circumference for their modeling agency. That is the industry that we are in. So the plus size modeling industry, to me, honestly, I always thought it was a gimmick, as someone that works in the industry, and I hear what people say and how people are so like, yeah, I'm trying to lose weight, I need to be skinny, I need to be skinny, I need to be skinny. So yeah, I always knew that it was like a ticking time bomb, and like it was going to go down. But once I saw the Ozempic thing trending, I knew, okay, this is probably what is going to lead to that industry going down. One thing I will say though, my argument for the plus size modeling industry is that the average size, let's say the UK, for example, I know the average size of a woman in the UK is a size 16. And I think it's obviously very beneficial for a size 16 woman, who's the average size woman in the UK, to have an idea of what clothing is going to look like on a body that reflects their body type, right? There's no point if I was like a shopper, if I was a woman and I'm a size 16 and I'm shopping for clothing and everything is displayed on size 0 models, that doesn't help in terms of how will I know how this will look on me though? Okay, cool. It looks like that on a size 0 model, but how does that look on the average woman? So it's so beneficial to have models that represent the average woman, so that you can just have a better viewpoint on how it looks like on the average woman. And that's one thing I've always thought, that is like, it's not really that beneficial for the average woman to really, see clothing on size 0 models all the time, because they won't know how it fits on them or how it even looks. That's why you see all those TikToks where it's like, those TikToks where it's like how it looks at the store and then how it looks on me, how it looked that like in the store reality, online reality. That's kind of what those TikToks are alluding to. Let's see. I don't see the art on obese people on the runway. So a lot of plus size models in the fashion, you can't describe a lot of plus size models that work in the industry as obese, because they're not. There tends to be this weird thing where it's like, if you're not a size 0, you're obese. Most of the plus size models in the fashion industry are size 10s. A size 10 is not obese. Like, majority of plus size models are literally like a size 10 or like 12. That is not obese in any metric of like what your scale is. So this whole thing that, the plus size modeling industry is encouraging obesity is always a perspective I've always found weird, because a size 10 or a 12 is not obese, and actually a size 10 is a very healthy weight to be, actually, rather than being like extremely underweight. So yeah, I don't buy that. But reading on. At first, modeling was hard and I felt alienated. When I went to castings or shoots, the skinny models were confused as to why I existed. So many of the girls had eating disorders because of their whole careers hinged on being a certain size. They didn't understand why I was allowed in the same castings as them. It didn't help that I didn't know the rules. Models rarely ate, and some even chewed calorie-free toilet paper or cotton wool. Yeah, so this is facts. I've already told you guys my story. I've genuinely, and not just once, multiple times, I've seen people faint on set because they haven't eaten. Exactly what Luke is saying. They're not obese, they're just thick. That's facts. That's facts. But I've genuinely seen that in person. I've seen that in person. But reading on, I didn't last long with store management and left within a year, even though they had initially approached me. There was so much fat phobia within the agency. People would speak about me saying The fat girl is coming in and didn't even care if I heard. They just wanted to sign me because they knew I'd get 5 minutes of fame. And this is exactly what I'm talking about how performative the luxury industry is. So if you work in fashion, you would know that these are the conversations that happen around models. So you would know that it's a ticking time bomb because everyone is kind of against it. And the only reason why they're doing it is just to have like the performative 2 or 3 plus size models that they can put on the runway just to be like, yeah, we care about inclusivity. And so that people can make TikToks about, oh my God, I love Louis Vuitton's casting. Louis Vuitton's casting was great. They had 2 plus size models this season. That's all it's for, to be very honest with you. But reading on, representing bigger bodies was important to me, so I signed with Milk Management, a much more inclusive agency, which I'm still with now. The jobs were still challenging though. Even years later, when I was an established model and had worked with huge brands like ASOS, MAC Cosmetics, and River Island, I was treated differently. There's one job I'll never forget, a big group photo shoot for a lingerie brand. I was sitting on a sofa, dressed in baggy clothes. Models always show up to a set in loose clothes, so no indents are left on the skin. I was waiting for my turn to go into makeup when one of the hairstylists walked past and told me to go and empty the bins. I was so shocked. I was one of the biggest names on that shoot, but because my body was bigger, he assumed I wasn't a model and completely dismissed me. That's crazy. That's insane, by the way. They're like, can you throw away the stuff at the bins, please? You must be a cleaner because you're not skinny. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. That is so insane. Yugi Nation is like, so why is it called plus size? Because plus size models are bigger than what we associate as normal models, which is a size 0. So that's why it's called plus size. It's not called plus size because they are obese. There are, let's say, there are some models who maybe veer on more of the obese side, but I think actually that I would say that those people hijacked the plus size model movement. I think the actual point of the plus size model movement, especially initially, was to promote women in healthier bodies at healthier sizes where they're not under eating and, you know, having eating disorders like a size 10, a size 12, a size 14. That was the plus size model movement initially. And they were the ones that were pushing for, you know, having women in healthy bodies being reflected in the modeling industry. So this idea that the plus size modeling industry is promoting obesity, I don't agree with that, to be honest. I don't agree with that at all. But reading on. Let's read on. Things did improve as the years went on. Around 2015, the body positivity movement peaked in the UK and work was busier than ever. Every single brand wanted to do a body positivity campaign. I was on a different job every other day. Now, let's pause. Plus size model or not, as a model, I just explained that I've worked in the fashion industry long enough to know that there's no longevity in the modeling industry. You could be here today, gone tomorrow as a model. So obviously this part of it is to do with like the people not caring about the plus size, like booking plus size models as much as, you know, before. But you can use that perspective on anything. Sometimes there are trends in the modeling industry where people are looking for, you know, I don't know, taller models, and that's the trend. Then they might decide they want smaller models. Then they might decide they want models, you know, with certain features. Then they want models with different features. So the modeling industry is so fickle. Like being a model is so fickle as a job, unless you're part of the top 0.00001%. So as a model, you should have a plan B. So every model is going to have a peak in their career for the most part. So that's not necessarily like a strange thing. She's like, yeah, I had so many jobs and there aren't too many jobs anymore. That's kind of normal for a lot of models. But let's read on. I was fully aware some were just virtue signaling and box ticking, but I learned to play them at their own game. The work was rolling in. It was an exciting time, one that resulted in real change. There were curve models on the catwalk, and some, like the American model Ashley Graham, became as famous and celebrated as the likes of Moss. Plus-size influencers appeared all over Instagram. in cosmetics campaigns, and fashion labels even started extending their sizing. I finally felt like a real part of the industry that had neglected me for so long. Of course, I received horrendous comments on social media. I still do, but that's the nature of the game, and luckily, I'm resilient. Reading those comments takes me back to being in the studio with all the skinny models who alienated me. The only reason those people care about my size is because they've got issues with their own body image. Yeah, I mean, there's many factors at play. I think that also you have to think from the perspective of like a model that probably has an eating disorder, doesn't eat. I think it's human nature that if you feel like the only reason why you're allowed in a room is because you don't eat and you've like basically starved yourself to be a certain size, it makes sense why that kind of person would build so much resentment to someone that walks in and isn't unhealthily skinny and is just like a normal weight. So it doesn't surprise me. It's toxic behavior, but it's not surprising if you walk in a room for the people that, you know, aren't eating and they're chewing on toilet paper and stuff. It's just, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw those kind of people bully someone for being a size 14 or whatever. That's to be expected, to be honest. But reading on. As plus size models have become more accepted, an argument developed that having bigger bodies on magazine covers and adverts was unhealthy and promoted obesity. Oh, we're getting into it. We're getting into the spicy part. Yet, it's worth noting our industry also coined heroin chic as a fashion trend. That is true. Those people are rarely called out, though. Those people are rarely called out, though, because they are skinny. This I read it because the comma is in the wrong place, but neither here nor there. The journalist needs to put commas in the right place. What people don't realize is that inclusivity helped all women, not just plus size ones. Us being celebrated meant all the skinny models who were starving themselves felt more safe and accepted, and young girls could look up to women who looked more like themselves. The industry was a better place. Sadly, it didn't last. In the Ozempic era, being skinny is easier than ever. And the first place to welcome skinny back with open arms is the fashion industry. It's heartbreaking to see. The work has dried up, and many of my friends who carved careers as plus size models and influencers are now looking for part-time jobs. So this part is neither here nor there because, like I said, modeling is fleeting, plus size or not. So they should have just had a plan B the whole time, or they should have, like, when they were earning the money, they should have known that there was like a life cycle on it, and they should have kind of invested their money elsewhere, to be honest. One thing I'm going to ask you guys about Ozempic, because I saw someone in the chat saying that they are on Ozempic and it's not as expensive as people think. So as someone that uses Ozempic, if you're in the chat, what are the side effects? What are the potential side effects of Ozempic use? Because Ozempic is literally supposed to be like a diabetic drug, right? I can only imagine there's so many things that could happen to you long term if you use that over the long term. So I'm curious, as some of my resident users of Ozempic, I want to know what you guys think. What are the long-term drawbacks of using it? The toilet paper thing sounds funny, but man, this is someone with a serious eating disorder. This is fucked. Yeah, it really is really fucked up. Okay, people are saying stomach pain is a major one. Pancreas issues. Damn. People are willing to risk pancreas issues. I mean, it only makes sense that it would affect your pancreas because it's supposed to be like a diabetic drug. Let's see. Headaches, mood swings, heart palpitations. What? People are playing with their lives right now. Neurological issues. Jeez. Nausea, stomach problems, stomach pain. Damn. That's insane. What happens when you come off Ozempic? Because one thing about losing weight naturally, and I know this because I'm a qualified personal trainer. If any of you guys want to be trained, I'm just joking. I am a qualified personal trainer though. So one thing about losing weight, the natural way, is that when you lose weight gradually, your hormones actually adjust and to your new weight. And when your hormones adjust, it allows, especially if you build muscle mass at rest, your the amount of calories you burn, like your BMR, increases, and therefore it's easier to stay at that weight once you lose it. But I can imagine that if you use a drug like Ozempic, you're not changing your hormones alongside the weight loss. So once you remove the Ozempic, all your hormones are still out of whack based on your old weight, and your body just reverts back to that. So that's also another thing. So that means that you're stuck on doing Ozempic. Meanwhile, there are all these potential drawbacks, like someone said, pancreas, heart palpitations. That's insane. No one should be willing to risk all of that just to lose weight in the short term, especially because you can lose weight without Ozempic. Like, it's not necessary. The thing with Ozempic is that it doesn't burn fat or anything like that. It improves your ability to resist eating food. So it does say some mean things about some people with weight gain issues. Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Apparently you're supposed to slowly get off Ozempic and start building muscle. I guess that would be the better way to do it, because if you rely solely on Ozempic, like I've said, your hormones aren't changing. Yeah, what happened to exercise and eating good? Exactly. And a gradual weight loss, even just for your health, losing weight gradually, because part of losing weight gradually, that's why they always say that you shouldn't lose weight quickly. Losing weight gradually allows your hormones to adjust. It allows a lot of your other body to adjust with the weight loss. And that's why it's easier to keep weight off if you lose it gradually. Any kind of quick weight loss isn't good for your body, hormonally, health wise. It's just all bad. um, but yeah, that's fascinating though. That's what I've always found fascinating about Ozempic, because people are just thinking about losing weight in the short term without considering the long-term effects. I don't think there's anything wrong with weight loss, especially if you're like a weight that is bad and detrimental for your health and puts you at risk of many health issues. I would just say lose weight the better way, which is slowly. um, so yeah, but let's read on. Let's read on. It's all trickles down from the catwalks. For the past 3 years, I've issued a report, including the curve, where I record the number of curvy models at every single fashion show, and the results are horrifying. At London Fashion Week in 2023, there were 85 plus size models. This year, there were 26. Milan has always been and still is the worst. If they peaked at 45 curve models in 2023 because Dolce & Gabbana had hired Caroline Vito, a Brazilian designer known for size inclusivity, this year, though, Milan only had 10. To be fair, Milan is not the best example to use because Milan is the least diverse. Like, Milan Fashion Week is the least diverse fashion week, and it's always been that way. Whether it's to do with by race or by size, Milan Fashion Week has always been the least diverse. So yeah, so Milan going down in curve models, even though it is a big jump from like peaking at 45 in 2023 to only having 10, that really doesn't surprise me at all. It doesn't surprise me. I've told you guys this story before, but you guys might not know. So I'll say it to the new members of the stream. So one of my friends is a designer, Tokyo James. He shows at Milan Fashion Week, and he casted like loads of black models because obviously his brand is like very African inspired. Not completely, but he's a Nigerian designer, so therefore a lot of his inspiration just naturally comes from where he's from. So he booked all these like black models to like kind of enact this like theme of his collection. And then what happened was Moncler had a massive show, and there was this big article that came out in the Italian news during Fashion Week that was like, Milan Fashion Week is the least diverse and it's a big problem, and started like naming and shaming certain brands that aren't very diverse with models that they cast. And so overnight, even though he had done all his casting, all those companies took his models basically, because he casted basically most of the black models that were in Milan at the time for his show. And all these big companies started scrambling looking for black models, so they just took his. And you can't really blame the models. Like, we don't blame the models. It's more money, it's a bigger job, it's better for their resume to, you know, model for Moncler than an emerging brand. So we understand, but it's just crazy that happened. It's insane. So every time I think of Milan Fashion Week, I just think, yeah, Milan is like literally not diverse in any way. Like, if you're going to Milan for diversity, good luck. But reading on, New York, which used to be at the forefront of plus size representation, had a 50% decrease in size inclusion this past season. You're going backwards, and it seems no one in the industry seems to care. No wonder Topshop, a brand synonymous with the skinny culture of the noughties, announced its return last week. That's a funny parallel to draw, but I understand. Hearing the news took me straight back to being a size 14 teenager. A fun day out with friends, ruined by being unable to find anything in my size, making me believe I was humongous. Everything we have worked hard for is slowly disappearing. Brands and designers in this industry are evaporating us from their runways, designs, and consideration. A few years ago, plus size models were in demand, and London Fashion Week was at the forefront. Many of my plus size friends didn't receive a single casting this year, and it was evident on the catwalk. That London thing is very true. In the next stream, I'll probably talk about the fact that the latest London Fashion Week was cancelled, because I think that's a very, very interesting topic. Someone in the chat asking, how did you pick two triggering topics? I like my channel to be somewhere where we can actually discuss these things, because I think that a lot of people in fashion in general are very scared of covering controversial topics. I don't know why. I think they don't want to say something that's like, oh my god, you're not one of the girls or something. And I understand that. I get that. However, I just think that people need to have platforms where they can discuss these things amicably. So yeah, struggling to speak, geez. But yeah. Someone is also saying my chat needs a mod. My chat definitely does need a mod. I'm trying to think who would be a good mod for my chat. I would make Culture a mod if Culture wants to be a mod, because Culture's in the streams. I'd make Imani a mod too. If you guys want to be mods, let me know, and I'll put you guys as mods. You guys will become the first mods. Well, it needs to be people that are frequently in the chat, which both of you are, to be honest. Yeah, because the chat is rough. Nominate Anglerfish, You Woman, You and Culture. Those are some good nominations. Those are some good nominations. Let me know, guys, if you guys want to be mods, and I'll make you mods. No, Luke, I would never. You were never in consideration to be a mod. I love you, Luke, but no, you would just be kicking people out unfairly for no reason. So no, we were never going to make you a mod, Luke. That was never going to happen. Luke would ban people for liking collections that he doesn't like. Like, no, Luke, you were never in consideration. Oh my god, that's funny. Okay, let me I'm gonna add let's see, Culture and Imani as mods after. You guys will be the first mods. And Anglerfish. But I'll write it down. Let me just write it down on the side to make sure. You guys have veto power. With great power comes great responsibility. Also, Jennifer, I'll make you a mod if you want to be. I know you can't make it to most of the streams, but I feel like you'd be an amazing mod, actually. Yeah, the chat is not that bad for now, but I think that I think that moving forward, especially as the channel grows, it will definitely be something that we will need, to be very honest with you. But yeah, reading on. Let's read on the article, guys. Let's read on. Part of the problem is the rise of the mid-size industry, which is anyone between a size 12 and 16. Jobs that used to go to plus size models are now going to mid-size ones because that's a smaller, more palatable curve for the fashion industry to tolerate. Although the plus size market in the UK is estimated to be worth 738.4 million. So I don't agree with that point. That it's because it's more palatable. I guess it's true in that sense, but I just think that more reflects like the average size. Like a 12 to 16 is more the average size. I also find it interesting how the terminology around plus size modeling has changed. Because when plus size modeling used to be a thing, which is why I said it was hijacked, it used to be between like a size, like some size 8, but really a size 10 to 14. That was mainly like when the early plus size modeling industry, that was kind of what it was. And then it became like 18, 20, 22, and then there became like a mid-size thing, which was more like 12 to 16. So it's weird how these things like have been changing as time has progressed, to be honest. But reading on, seeing the industry boomerang back to what it once was is devastating. And in many ways, it makes me want to give up, but I won't, because clothes can be on trend or in fashion, but our bodies should never be. So yeah, interesting article, interesting topic, especially considering that Ozempic is all the rage. We'll put this back on the screen because insane. Like the I love Ozempic thing. I remember when that actually was on the runway. Because I believe it was it who put this on the runway? Was it Avavav? I think it was Avavav, but I could be wrong. But I know it was definitely Berlin Fashion Week. That's for sure. But I remember when it came out, everyone was like going crazy, like, "Oh my god, like this is so insane!" And a lot of the Berlin brands, a lot of the brands at Berlin Fashion Week, they do a lot of like for social media gimmicks. Like it's very much like, let's put a very controversial slogan on the runway so loads of people start talking about it. Actually, okay, so it was Berlin-based label Nemilia that basically made the vest. It looks like something that Avavav would do. That kind of like gimmicky crap. But it's very, very gimmicky. Extremely gimmicky, to be honest. Extremely gimmicky. So yeah, any parting thoughts on the Ozempic epidemic before we continue? Let's see if there's any closing thoughts on the world of Ozempic. Her final line is a nice sentiment, but it's not the case. Body shape trends have always been a thing for centuries. It's the norm, unfortunately. Yeah, that's true. That definitely is true. I mean, we were in a phase of like ultra skinny, and then we were in a phase of like the BBL era, and then we're in the phase of like, that's facts. Like body shape trends are definitely a thing. And I actually think, funny enough, that now we're going away from the whole BBL kind of thick body type being a trend. And I've seen it reverting slowly back to kind of when I was younger, when it was all about like being skinny and slim. So I think if anything, the modeling industry is coinciding with the body trend of the time. Like, yeah, exactly. We're entering like the Ozempic skinny heroin chic phase. I feel like that's where we're going in terms of body trends. Everything in cycles as usual. Exactly. But anyway, moving on. Another story that I was like, finally, is we're going back to luxury fashion, guys. Luxury no longer means quality. Consumers weigh in on the slowdown. Finally, luxury consumers finally understand that just because you're buying a brand that was associated with luxury last century doesn't mean that they make quality garments. Finally, the consumers have caught up with what we've been saying on this channel forever. Like, geez, yes, I have been saying this for years, and this article definitely is 5 years too late. Finally, guys, finally. So let's read on. We surveyed almost 1,000 consumers about how their luxury spending habits have changed and how brands can better meet their needs amid the market slowdown. Overcoming the luxury slowdown won't be just a case of waiting the market out. Brands need to listen to consumers and adapt accordingly. The luxury industry lost some 50 million consumers in 2024. Inflation and the rising cost of living have forced some to cut back. Meanwhile, consumer confidence is also suffering, particularly in China, which has hit many brands. To understand how spending habits are changing and what brands could do better to reach luxury customers, we surveyed almost 1,000 Vogue and GQ readers in the US and the UK and Vogue business readers globally. So imagine they've surveyed Vogue and GQ readers and Vogue business readers. So these are already like more fashion forward readers, and even they are finally accepting that luxury doesn't mean quality. Damn. If fashion people that consume fashion news and fashion information are just realizing this, we have a long way to go before like the average everyday consumer finally understands this, to be honest. But then again, you can't really expect much from the typical Vogue or GQ reader because so many different kinds of people like read Vogue. Like there's people I know that don't care about fashion, but they still kind of read Vogue, and they have a Vogue subscription just because it's Vogue. They kind of put it on their coffee table and stuff like that. So there's like a wide range of readers when it comes to Vogue or GQ, to be honest. But let's see. They said the key takeaway from their survey is that consumers are aware of price increases and are looking for more value. Those under 35 are shopping more for luxury than those over 35, but they are shopping through alternative channels like resale or sample sales. Most concerningly for brands, sentiment towards luxury brands is relatively negative. Consumers said brands could improve their appeal by providing better value for money, more ethical practices, and improved product quality. I mean, they are late to the party. They are extremely late to the party, to be very honest with you. Very, very late, but I digress. Consumers have grown more cost conscious. The vast majority, 77% of respondents, agree that luxury fashion items cost more than they did a year ago. This has led to shifts in their shopping behavior. 37% agree that they shop less for luxury fashion than they did a year prior. And 2/3 said that they are more likely to wait for discounts or sales to purchase luxury fashion items than ever before. So we've got some interesting graphs. Luxury fashion items are more expensive than they were a year ago. So 77% agree. Wait, the 7% of people that disagree that luxury fashion items are more expensive, are they like blind or just outright stupid? Like, all you need to do to know if luxury prices have gone up is to find out what the luxury price was 2 years ago and compare that with the price that it is today. How could you disagree with that when the prices have objectively gone up? Are they just like blind? Do they live like in a cave or something? Like, what the hell? How can you disagree on something that's so objective? Like, numbers are so objective. Like, if a number has gone up, it means that luxury items are more expensive than they were. Like, how can you disagree about that? That's so dumb. Anyway, reading on. I shop less for luxury items than I did a year ago. So 31% of people still shop the same. That's fair enough. They're probably really rich and not affected by economic downturns. 37% of people shop less for luxury items than they did a year ago. And 32% are kind of just neutral on the matter. That's very interesting. Yeah, exactly. Inflation is a thing. They must be so rich they don't understand. They didn't notice that the prices went up, probably. A Chanel flap is literally $18,000. It was less than 10K 6 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Are you planning to have daytime streams, or is there no way for me to have a normal sleep schedule? I think moving forward, I definitely want to have more daytime streams rather than these middle of the night streams. So yeah, they will be coming soon. My bad. My apologies. I'm a bit of a night owl, to be honest. She said she wears it until it comes loose. Wait, rich people do that? She didn't even know that her Rolex has a fine adjusting system. Wait, she said she wears it until it comes loose. What the hell? That's crazy. Denial is a powerful thing. Yeah, I guess some of them might just be in denial, to be honest. They might think it's inflation, and also that incomes rose with inflation, so there isn't a meaningful difference. Not my opinion. Oh yeah, they might just think that, but I think it's just I didn't know that some consumers were that like obtuse. That's quite surprising that some luxury consumers are like objectively obtuse. But let's read on. Among those who have reduced their luxury spending, the primary reasons are that luxury items no longer offer good value to justify the price. That was said by 41%, and that they prefer to spend their money on other things. That goes and alludes to things that I've said in past streams, where I've talked about moving to hospitality, and a lot of luxury brands are investing in that because they realize that the younger generation, especially Gen Z, they are investing more in experiences than luxury goods. So they're going on holiday, they're going to luxury restaurants, they're going to cafes. So that is kind of how things have been adjusting over time. But let's read on. Why have you reduced your spending on luxury fashion items or accessories in the past year? So 41% said they no longer see good value. Another 41%, let me zoom in just so you guys can see it clearer. Another 41% said, I now prefer to spend money on other things. Oh, yeah, exactly what I was alluding to. That's a big percentage. Experiences, holidays, I can no longer afford it. 32%, that's a big. Think of like how much market share the luxury industry is losing when you have a survey of quite clearly people that consume fashion information and consume these products, 33% saying they can no longer afford it. Damn. 90% saying they prefer to buy secondhand luxury items or accessories. 15% saying they prefer to buy small luxury items like beauty, fragrance, or home goods. Interesting. And then other 8%, they no longer align with my ethics and values. 2%, I prefer to rent luxury products, and none of the above. Interesting. I mean, I could never afford luxury fashion anyway, at least not in the way that people can normally consume luxury fashion. So a lot of it didn't make any difference to me because I never pay retail for starters because I can't afford retail. And with the tariffs and everything else, oh my gosh, like the prices are going to go through the roof, to be honest. Insane. Reading on, many customers who said their perception of luxury brands has declined in the past year cited quality as a concern. Finally, I've been praying to the fashion gods and they answered my fashion prayers. For every consumer to be more discerning about the quality of stuff that they buy and not spend so much money on subpar made products. Finally, my prayers have been answered. Some luxury brands have increased their prices significantly, but the quality has reduced. Luxury no longer means long-lasting quality products, said one respondent. So, you know, my mission is complete. Your mission is complete, young Padawan. Do you know what's funny? They're saying that no longer, as if that wasn't the case. That has literally been the case since the early 2000s. Obviously, it's worse now, but this has been a thing, like the quality of luxury fashion going down. This has been happening since the early 2000s. So we are in 2025, and people are finally realizing that this is the case. Damn, it took them long enough. Reading on, because of the perceived lack of value across luxury today, consumers are seeking alternatives from contemporary brands or vintage resellers. The value of goods against the price has caused my perception of luxury brands to decline. It should have declined way sooner, sis, but we're glad that you finally you've come on board the ship. And the rise of new silent luxury brands that are really competitively priced and good quality, said one respondent. Secondhand products are, paradoxically, of better quality than the recent products of the same brand, one respondent noted. So, yeah, it just seems like consumers are finally starting to realize that just because you spend a lot of money on stuff doesn't mean that it's well made, which has been the case for years and years and years. But it's glad to see them come on board. Let me just see some of these graphs because I think some of them are really interesting. How has your spending on the following categories changed over the past year? So let's see. This dark graph is that spending has decreased. This is it's remained the same. And then the paler purple was increased, and then the more pale is I haven't shopped this category. So it's interesting that the biggest percentage has remained the same, which is what I would expect. There's also like big chunks that has decreased. So if you look at the luxury and clothing apparel, 30-something% has decreased. That's huge. It was 32%, I think, when we read it. That's insane. But then you have a higher percentage of people that, they're like, my spending has remained the same, which it makes sense. I think luxury consumers are the least affected by luxury downturns because if you're working class or if you're like struggling to make ends meet, most of your money goes towards essential things like electricity and food and travel. So you never were, buying those kind of things anyway. The kind of people that buy luxury fashion, especially consistently, tend to be people that have so much disposable income that if there's an economic downturn, they're fine. So this graph actually doesn't surprise me at all. Doesn't surprise me. Let's see how young consumers are shopping. Price increases haven't turned young consumers off luxury, quite to the opposite, in fact. The appetite for luxury among young consumers is clear. Our research shows under 35s are more likely to say their spending on luxury fashion has increased in the past year compared with over 35s. I don't know why that is. I'm going to guess, and you guys in the chat, let me know what you also think is the reason why. I think because we are in the social media, TikTok, Instagram generation, I think loads of people feel like they need to keep up with the Joneses more so than ever, which is why I think that luxury consumers, more so than older consumers, feel like they need to spend on luxury, which is hilarious because people that are my age, like Gen Z and millennials, they have way less spending power than older generations. Older generations are the generations that bought houses when it was cheap. They own properties. They have crazy retirement funds. They have massive businesses. They've been in their career for 20, 30 plus years. They're CEOs. Like, those are the people that actually have the money. So to see that younger people are more likely to buy luxury goods, that means that, people our age are not financially sound. People my age, I'm Gen Z, if you weren't aware, people my age clearly don't have their finances in check. They don't have their finances in check. By the time you're 35, you usually have a steady income and established career. Younger people start working. But the thing is, they said under 35s. So this is everyone under the age of 35. If I was to take a guess, I would say that you peak in your career between the age of like 35 to maybe like 55. That's like the peak of financial earning of most people. Most people are going to make the most money they've ever made in their life between the ages of 35 and 55. So this says under 35 though. So these are all people that aren't really that, long in their careers, to be honest. If they said like 35 to 45, I'd understand, but under 35s, that's crazy. Jennifer says, actually, this last week has shook even the richest clients I know. Peeps I had never expected are making budgets. Oh, yeah, of course. Because this article came out before Trump's tariffs announcements. But yeah, the tariffs changed the industry in a way that no one could have expected, to be honest. But yeah, that's definitely to be expected. That's definitely to be expected. Like, I know people my age under 30 are in debt, and I'm like, how? Exactly. Isn't my generation the generation that is known for using Afterpay and Klarna to buy things that they don't need, like luxury goods and stuff? So it's very much my generation of keeping up with the Joneses and stuff like that. Or they could just be rich kids. I think someone alluded to it in the chat. I guess they're all Nepo babies. Yeah. They could just be kids of rich people also. They could be under 35s and they're just like, my dad gives me a credit card and I can just buy what I want. Using Afterpay on Uber Eats is insanity, to be fair. Because ordering food is just inherently expensive. So if you can't afford food, if you shouldn't be ordering takeaway, you should be cooking your own food, unless obviously you're living in a place where you can't cook. But if that's not the case, you should be saving money by cooking, not going into more debt ordering on Uber Eats. But that this is not a financial advice channel. I'm just saying what I would do, guys. I'm not a financial advisor. This is also true. Credit cards serve huge benefits if you know how to use it. Afterpay has zero benefits. Also, I think credit cards have benefits if you use it for things that make sense. Luxury goods don't make sense in any. There's no reason to use credit cards to buy things that are unessential. The only argument, at least from my perspective, to use credit cards is like you can use it for cash flow things that make sense. You can use it for, like, some people use it for investments and make a higher return than their interest rate. That makes sense. But on things that you don't need, though, things that aren't necessary, like luxury goods, especially like a luxury brand, it just, there's no world in which I can understand why you would go into debt to buy a bag, because that bag then becomes ultra expensive. If you use a credit card to buy a 5K bag and you can't pay it back, with the interest that is being incurred on that credit card, especially if you can't pay it back, you end up, by the time you can pay it back, that bag actually costs 15K, not 5K. So it's insane. It's insane. Using a credit card does not mean it's debt necessarily. It does if you don't pay it off, but most people don't pay it off. So if you look at like the typical, let's see, typical USA credit card debt, because it's not debt. Credit card usage is actually not counted as debt until you don't pay it. So if you pay it off, you don't pay any interest, so it can't be debt. It's normally when you don't pay it off that it then becomes debt. So due to statistics, this is via Lending Tree. Let's see what they say about credit card debt. 1 second. Let me just get this. I need something like recent. I need a recent stat. Okay, this is a Forbes study. This should be good. Average credit card debt study in 2025. So credit card debt, the Federal Reserve reveals that credit card debt stood at $18.04 trillion, which obviously is crazy, but let's look at, so they have it by state. So, damn, District of Columbia, $7,750, Alaska, $7,631, Maryland, damn, that's a lot of debt. Let's look at by generation. So this should be fascinating. Let me just move so you can see it. So Generation Z or Z, 3,456 average credit card debt. Millennials, damn, 6,932. Generation X, 9,557. And then baby boomers have less, and the silent generation actually has the least credit card debt. So yeah. Also, by the way, credit card debt does not put into account like things like like Klarna, Afterpay, all those things. which is a totally different thing, which is also something that is a big issue, especially with people my age. Like so many friends that I have, I love them, but their spending habits are concerning. Like I'm concerned for them. Like they buy loads of luxury goods on Klarna, and in my head, I'm just thinking, are you sure you can keep up with these payments? Especially because these aren't like necessary things. Why not just save up and then buy it when you can actually afford it, rather than making your financial situation so like dire where you have all these payments every month and you're like, I don't know, I just wouldn't do that personally. But once again, I'm not giving financial advice. It's just kind of what I would do. I'm just the kind of person, if I can't afford something, I just don't buy it. So yeah. Let's see. Going back. Across all age groups, 46% agree that they are more interested in purchasing secondhand luxury fashion than they were a year ago. Amongst those who have increased their secondhand shopping, the primary reason cited was affordability, followed by sustainability, and then because it's rarer or more exclusive. That's cool, because I remember when more consumers started investing in the secondhand market, we saw all these platforms being built, whether it's the Real, Grailed, all those kind of things. And people, the general sentiment was like, ew, who would buy secondhand clothes? Stuff like that. So it's good to see that consumer mindsets have changed and a lot more luxury consumers are actually understanding that, oh, I can actually buy something that's more rare and isn't in production by buying secondhand, and it's more sustainable because I'm increasing the lifespan of this garment and stuff like that. It's cool to see people change their minds about that, because I found the way that people used to think about secondhand clothing quite toxic, to be very honest with you. I'm glad a lot of people have been calling out people using Klarna buying luxury fashion, and a lot of luxury fashion aren't worth it pertaining materials and styles compared to the past. Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Someone is saying, "Don't make me hungry. Everything is closed right now." Or everyone is saying that they use Klarna to buy food. Exactly this. This is the number one rule. Don't buy on credit what you can't comfortably pay off, because otherwise, it just starts to become too expensive, and then it starts to build, and then it gets to a point where you can't pay it off. Obviously, the only time is if some people are in such a bad financial situation that they just have to use credit. Like some people, especially during economic downturns, have to use credit to pay their bills or eat and stuff like that. So that makes sense. But that makes sense also because they're using credit on necessities. But using credit on things that aren't necessary and you can't afford to pay it, to me, is just like an absolute no financially. I wouldn't advise anyone to do that. I know I'm on a fashion channel and we talk about clothes, but I would never promote irresponsible spending because I don't want anyone in my audience to be like in dire straits financially. So I would never tell anyone to do that, to be honest. Um, so yeah, just like Holly said, credit cards are lifesavers. I think once again, it depends how you use the credit card. I think the main issue is if you can't afford to pay it back. That's all. If you can afford to pay it back, loads of credit cards even have benefits. So like you can get flying miles and points. Some of them don't charge you fees abroad, like transaction fees abroad. I think it just depends. So yeah. The days of being looked down upon for buying secondhand do not feel far away, to be honest. Wasn't it? That was always a thing, right? Like, oh, you're buying secondhand clothes. That was always like a thing that people used to shame people for. And I feel like nowadays, actually, it's flipped, where it's kind of praised to wear secondhand clothing because it's kind of good for the environment. It's kind of like a hippie, fashion forward thing to do. So yes. The financial roadman strikes again. He's giving holistic advice. Holly says, I got my first credit card at 28, though I think it should be a 25 plus thing. You need some adult financial experience first. I'm totally with you. I agree. I agree. But yeah. So anyway, guys, that's the story around the survey that I thought was interesting. There's more stuff there, but I just kind of wanted to comment on it because I thought it was really interesting. I'm like, oh wow, people actually, you know, understand that luxury doesn't automatically mean quality. We finally got there. We finally got there. We finally got there. Then now we're going to switch lanes into sports. I know you guys love when I talk about sports, right? Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but I thought this was an interesting topic because a lot of athletes now are hiring stylists, and a lot of sports teams have started hiring stylists because they have seen the impact that's having on their ability to work with certain luxury brands, align themselves with luxury fashion, and also have brand partnerships, especially for their athletes. We've seen so many athletes be signed recently. You have basketball players like Victor Wembanyama, who is a Louis Vuitton ambassador right now. You have very some interesting footballers being picked as ambassadors, which I don't understand why, because no one knows them for style, and their style to me is very tacky. Like Jack Grealish, he's an ambassador for Gucci. I do not understand that, but I guess he's one of the ambassadors for Gucci. So we're seeing these deals in real time. We see Jude Bellingham also signed with Louis Vuitton. And before, I think earlier, we used to see mainly only like Formula One, like historically, it was really only Formula One, basketball, Formula One and basketball athletes mainly that got all the brand deals, aligned with fashion. But now I think more and more sports are being aligned with fashion. Like we're seeing football players be signed for the first time, and like so many other sports. And it seems that there's a bigger focus on style for sports teams than there ever has been before, to be very honest. Like all these moments in sports and fashion aligning. But let's read. When seven-time world champion Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton left his Mercedes-Benz team for Scuderia Ferrari, Mercedes found itself in a vulnerable spot. Not only did they just bad English. Not only had they just lost. I thought they said not only did they just lost. I was about to say, geez, not in Vogue business, but I was wrong. Not only had they just lost their best driver on the track, but they lost the gravity of his cultural force off track. That's very true. Hamilton has arguably become the biggest F1 star with 39 million Instagram followers. I didn't know he had that many followers, to be honest. And partnerships with brands including Dior, Lululemon, and Tommy Hilfiger. I mean, to be fair, Lewis Hamilton is known as the Formula One's fashionista. Like people always take pictures of his outfits on the grid. Like that is very. Let me even Google it. Lewis Hamilton grid outfits. Like he's known for that. That is literally like part of his brand. Like look. Like Lewis Hamilton on the grid, like Lewis Hamilton grid fashion. That's like a famous thing. I like that he experiments. Personally, I would say that Lewis Hamilton's personal style is not to my own personal taste, but I always appreciate a man that experiments with his style. And I think he has a lot of outfits that he's worn that I've loved, but he's very hit or miss when it comes to his style. It's very, very all over the place. Lewis Hamilton, short king, petite baddie. Petite baddie is insane. That's crazy. But yeah, so he's quite famous. Not people in the chat saying I'm pushing my straight agenda. I mean, what do you guys want me to do? I talk about things that I'm interested in. But reading on, he's one of the key facilitators for fashion getting involved in the higher tier racing class. That's true. Also, now Ferrari would bask in his glow. To move its cultural momentum forward, the Mercedes team had to come up with a plan. It quietly listed a clothing executive job, a hybrid styling and fashion partnerships role. By early 2025, Eleanor Coleman had been hired as the team's first ever styling and partnerships manager. The creation of the styling and partnerships manager role is part of a broader commercial strategy aimed at strengthening our fashion and brand partnerships, says Richard Sander, Chief Commercial Officer of the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. While Lewis Hamilton was certainly a major reason for F1 embracing fashion, this role was conceived to ensure continuity and to further professionalize our approach to fashion, making it more strategic and impactful. And just across the board in general, I have seen a lot of sports teams actually creating jobs for fashion specific people. So, for example, was it Crystal Palace? I think. So, for people that don't know, Crystal Palace is a Premier League football team. It's like a really big team in the UK and worldwide. They have a really strong fan base. They hired like a creative team to design their apparel and design their football jerseys and stuff. So that was very interesting. Let me see if I can find an article about that, because that was a big story and that wasn't too long ago, actually. That was in 2023, I think. Okay, I found an article. Crystal Palace appoints Kenny and then Jonathan as the Premier League's first ever creative director. So the first ever creative director happened less than 2 years ago. So all of this stuff is happening really fast. So yeah, all of this stuff is very, very new. London-based football club Crystal Palace has become the first side in the Premier League to hire a creative lead to oversee apparel collections and fashion partnerships. So basically, Formula One is just almost 2 years late to the party, basically. They're just late in doing that. They just, didn't see the vision until much later is the point. But reading on, what was once built around one star has now been absorbed into an organizational strategy, a safeguard against cultural drop-off and a way to scale fandom across the team. While Lewis was our key original approach, the platform he used to express his natural style was created in conjunction with the team here, says Sander. No, Sander, I think you're taking too much credit. I think Lewis Hamilton's personality, he would have been known for fashion regardless of whatever team that he drove for. I don't think Mercedes should be taking any credit for Lewis Hamilton being a fashion icon. Like his ability to be a fashion icon has absolutely nothing to do with Mercedes, because there are people that are drivers in Formula One that are iconic as drivers, but no one knows them for style. Like Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen is a famous driver, won so many of the last recent championships, and no one knows him for style because he doesn't dress that way. So I'm going to call cap on that one, Mercedes team. Stop trying to give yourself credit in this article. But reading on, that foundation is now being scaled for its other drivers, including George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. George Russell and Kimi are never going to be fashion icons. Sorry. I'm a Formula One fan. I love George Russell. I think he's really wholesome. Kimi, I'm still warming to him. However, no one associates Kimi and George Russell with style. Like, stop it. Absolutely stop it. If Mercedes thinks that they can make George Russell a fashion icon, what? Stop it. Just stop it. Like, this is, for guys that don't know, George Russell is a British Formula One driver. Drip God Kimi, that's crazy. And his style to me is just like he dresses like, let me tell you what George Russell dresses like. George Russell dresses like an English guy that went to private boarding school in the UK. Like, this is how they dress, like Ralph Lauren polo shirts, like chinos, white sneakers, sunglasses, turtleneck with the navy Harrington jacket, like the bomber jacket with the white shirt and the sunglasses. Like, he dresses like a British boarding school boy. That is literally how he dresses. Like, they are not turning George Russell into a fashion icon. It's not happening. I do not see it. There's no world in which that happens, but good luck to the Mercedes team. Good luck to the Mercedes team. But this man is not becoming a fashion icon. They're not taking whatever they think that they did with Lewis Hamilton and turning it into, a fashion icon thing for their drivers. That's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. He could glow up. Who knows? I don't even think it's about a glow up or not a glow up. He's a Formula One driver. Like, his job is to be a good driver on the grid. That's his focus. His focus is not fashion. So unless you have a personal interest, like Lewis Hamilton does, there are some Formula One drivers that I think can be known for fashion. I think that, let me think of who are the most stylish Formula One drivers. I mean, I'm trying to think, because Lewis Hamilton, there's like a gap. It's like Lewis Hamilton. I think Lando Norris pulls out some outfits sometimes. I think who else? Who else? Pierre Gasly sometimes can pull out a fit. I feel like Pierre Gasly, he has some fits. Um, who else? There's not many of them. It's not many. Nico Rosberg is not a current driver though. But I do like Nico's style. Nico Rosberg can pull out an outfit for sure. But here, Nico Rosberg isn't driving. I'm talking about currently on the grid. You can go to the 60s and might find one. Damn. We're talking about current Formula One drivers because the Mercedes team is making the case that they can turn their drivers into the new Lewis Hamilton, which I'm not seeing. To me, the reach into fashion is very possible. Formerly Fashion Free Arena is sober now and an obvious money grab. Yeah, for sure. Definitely true, Jennifer. Someone said it's wankercore. Who said it's wankercore? So yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, I agree, but he's not on the grid either. I love Daniel Ricciardo, by the way. I'm a big fan of his, but yeah, he's not on the grid. Yeah, no F1 driver is fucking with Lewis Hamilton's son. No F1 driver is fucking with Lewis Hamilton's style. End of story. They will always look better in the F1 suits, anyways. That is true, also. But yeah, anyway, like I said, I just wanted to show you guys how George Russell dresses. Nothing against it. I just don't think that you can dress like this and be a fashion icon. I don't think that people look to people that dress like this as fashion icons. Like, this is, he genuinely dresses like kids that go to boarding school in the UK. Like, no joke. Like the rich kids that go to boarding. This is literally boarding school core, if that ever was a thing. Like polo shirts. Like, this must be Tommy Hilfiger. Exactly. Tommy Hilfiger hoodie with the overcoat. Like, it's so, this is literally how rich kids in the UK dress. Like the turtleneck. It's actually quite funny. I'm getting flashbacks. White denim shirt with white chinos, blue denim shirt, white sneakers. So this is who they think they can make a fashion icon. Interesting. Well, let's go back to the article. We want to keep investing in fashion collaborations that resonate with our broader audience. This shift in approach, making fashion a formal part of the commercial playbook, isn't unique to F1. Across sports league, a similar move is underway. In the NFL, stars like Joe Burrow and Saquon Barkley prove that fashion credibility is cultural credibility with real commercial value. That's true. Burrow's stylist Kyle Smith reported that the quarterback's appearance in a backless Peter Doe suit at Vogue World in 2024 generated $20 million in media impact value. I really need to figure out, because they always talk about this media impact value. I need to know how exactly they calculate it. Because they tend to always say, you know, yeah, they generated 100 million of media impact. It's like, what can that tangibly be related to in sales figures? So I'm curious to know about that. But reading on, the moment was orchestrated by Smith, who was recently named the NFL's fashion editor, underscoring just how much stylists can elevate the visibility and commercial impact for fashion brands and athletes. Pierre Mahio, creative director of Parisian label Officine Generale, saw retail impact after Super Bowl champion Barkley was styled in the brand by Joshua McPherson. Seeing the fresh faces in sports who are influencing American style has been interesting. Our men's customer in the States finds inspiration in different places than Europe. And I love to see how Saquon has worn the brand and the stores saw interest in the pieces. That is very true. I think that there are loads of people that have a lot of money that go to these games. I mean, to be very honest, you kind of have to be rich to go to the Super Bowl because that thing is expensive as hell. So those are probably the same kind of people, and the Super Bowl is very much like a men thing. It's like a manly thing. A lot of men are into sports, especially compared with women. So the menswear impact especially is in those kind of places, right? People with money that sit courtside at the NBA games, they have the spending power to just see something that they like and then be like, yeah, I'm gonna walk into the store and buy it. So it is like good marketing in a way, for sure. It's definitely good like product placement. And I'm surprised because I've said this on streams in the past, and you guys that that watch this will know this, but I've always said I don't know why these sports teams don't have like tunnel fits and like increase the commercial value, because the reason why NBA players make so much money in endorsements is because a lot of stuff that they wear on the court can actually be bought and worn casually. And then also they have the tunnel fit also that builds kind of their branding as like a fashionable person. And so many other sports just didn't have that. So finally, I don't know why these industries are so slow to adapt to things. Like, it's such an obvious thing to do, but they're only just realizing it. It's actually insane. But reading on, Courtney Mays, who has worked with four-time Women's NBA champion Sue Bird and New York Liberty forward Breanna Stewart for several years, told Vogue Business that brands choosing to work directly with experienced stylists involved in the Women's Basketball League would help them to truly understand what representing these athletes authentically actually means. I will say, because I'm a sports fan, so I watch women's and men's sports. I would say that the women's NBA players are really stylish. Like, they're really, really stylish. Some of them do work with stylists, to be fair, but they do pull out some really good fits. I'm surprised that a lot of those women's NBA players, especially because the league has been exploding with Caitlin Clark and all of that stuff. I'm surprised that they don't have more endorsement deals. I think it's coming though. I think a lot of them sooner or later are going to start signing more endorsement deals because the women's NBA players can really, really dress. They really can. But reading on, Smith says that the right fashion moments don't just expand a player's cultural reach. They open new demographics for teams and leagues alike. I always say to NFL athletes, what was the first concert you went to? And do you have a t-shirt from it? And then when you wear the Sade t-shirt, now you have a new fan that maybe wasn't your fan before, he explains. This psychological connection allows for prospective fans to see a bit of themselves in the league, and that starts their fan journey with football, with that player. Okay, we have a Travis Kelce wearing Tom Brown. That's not a good fit, though. I understand that, like, they're trying to, promote Tom Brown or whatever, but it just doesn't look great. The outfit just doesn't look great. Like, with the striped beanie and the tie and the blazer and the trousers, he does look a damn mess, and the suit does fit horribly. I don't know why they put him in that, to be honest. And this is how you know that this merging of sports with fashion, it needs some work, because I don't know what stylist put Travis Kelce in this suit, but that suit looks terrible. And with the J's, exactly, it just makes the suit look awful. Like, whichever stylist styled this, they need to change. That stylist shouldn't be styling Travis Kelce anymore. Damn. That looks awful, like, objectively. But reading on. For teams looking to grow their fan bases, fashion serves as a powerful acquisition tool, with stylists acting as facilitators to deliver the right moments to the right players and gain access to new audiences. We definitely have our hardcore fans on lock, Smith continues. The question is, how can we reach new audiences or just a new demographic of people? Fashion is a great way to do that. Building a holistic fashion strategy. Unlike personal stylists at the athlete level, a league or team stylist plays a cross-functional role, bridging social marketing partnerships and cultural strategy to shape how the organization shows up off the field. Maybe I need to apply to one of these jobs, because the things that these stylists are putting these players in, especially because I know you Americans, you guys have crazy salaries. I know they're going to be charging they're going to pay some stylist 200K to put these athletes in these awful outfits. Like, I definitely need to apply to one of these jobs because damn, like, if that's what they're doing, I can definitely do a better job than that. For sure. For sure. Like, if being a creative director of yes, plus consulting, if being a creative director of the fashion creative director of a sports team entails putting your athletes in looks like this, I can do a job. I can do a number. Putting athletes in poorly fitting suits, trust me, I can do that. I can definitely do a job there. But reading on, I feel like the biggest business justification for my role is okay. So Smith is talking about the justification for the role. That's cool. Unlike personal stylists at athlete level, legal team stylist plays a cross-functional role. Okay, we read that. I feel like the biggest business justification for my role is our helmet off marketing, says Smith. Okay, so what does that mean, Smith? He explains that fashion serves as a vehicle for these off-field moments, like when Smith is creating social content of players getting dressed for their tunnel entrances. It ultimately helps to build that fandom between players and our NFL audience, he explains. So these creative directors, they make social content. Oh my God, I could do that in my sleep, guys. I need to, where do I apply for some of these jobs? Wait. Sports creative director jobs. Where do I apply? Because, geez, creating social content, bro. Oh, yeah, I'm going to do some applications after this stream. That's insane. That's insane. Okay, let's read on. However, experts agree that a stylist is just one piece of the puzzle. To fully leverage fashion as a strategic tool, sports organizations need to think holistically. In an ideal world, a major sports organization would have a creative director, an in-house stylist, and an in-house production manager, and an in-house partnerships manager who is specifically focused on fashion. I agree with that. Shout out to Daniel Yor Miller. So Daniel, for guys that don't know who Daniel is, quick like side note. So when I worked at the Business of Fashion as a writer, Daniel was working there too, and Daniel specialized on all the like sports stories for BOF. I think he's no longer at BOF, but that's like his specialty. He covers sports, like where sports and business, sports business and fashion where it interacts. That's like his bread and butter. So he would know more than anyone else in the industry because he covers it the closest. So shout out to Daniel. But anyway, let's read his quote again. In an ideal world, a major sports organization would have a creative director, an in-house stylist, an in-house production manager, and an in-house partnerships manager who is specifically focused on fashion. Yeah, I agree with what he said there. They said a sports business and fashion journalist who also runs Sportsverse on Substack. You guys should definitely check out his Substack. Like really, really well versed when it comes to, you know, fashion and sports and where it intersects. And he, you know, he like just has great insights. So yeah, definitely check out his Substack. But reading on, brand strategist Hayden Friedman, who often works at the intersection between fashion and athletics brands, stresses the importance of partnerships managers in driving conversion at team level. Investing in a smart partnerships manager is one way that you could create a lot of impact across different parts of the consumer marketing funnel if you're a team or league, says Friedman. In practice, this role would own the strategy behind fashion-facing partnerships, identifying which brands make sense, ensuring collaborations align with the team's function and cultural identity, and turning cultural relevance into measurable business growth through KPIs related to acquisition conversion, media value, and impact on brand equity. All of that is factual. All of that is definitely factual. And I'll also say that if they have these like fashion-forward people working in-house for these teams, it could also help to educate the athletes on fashion, which would help their own personal brands, which could only mean good things for the teams that they play for, because the value of a team is based on the addition of their players versus so many other factors, right? And if your players are really valuable in the fashion space, then it makes the teams more valuable in the fashion space. So I think this could mean a lot of athletes being more fashion forward, thinking about their image, or hiring stylists, working with the in-house stylist. And historically, in-house people always understand their clients the best. Like if I think of the golden age of red carpet looks, I think of when modern stylists didn't exist, and it was all these like the same in-house designers that used to do the costume for films. Now we're talking about like the 20th century. I'm talking about people like Edith Head or Adrian. They would also be the in-house designers that would design the red carpet looks for their clients, and that to me is the golden age of red carpet looks. So if they can kind of recreate that, but like in a sports bro way, for these athletes, I think that could only mean good things, because they will truly understand the market, but also the people that they work for. Either the NFL or the NBA. The NFL has 53 players per team approximately. It will be easier to do for the NBA because the NFL has a lot of players per team, and it's more of a revolving door than the NBA, to be honest. It'll be more beneficial for the NBA than the NFL, but I still think it would be beneficial for the NFL also, for sure. Julia says this is an interesting article. I see what they're getting at, and it's quite true. Brand collaborations can really grow and influence fan bases. Yeah, for sure. Can you come up with 54 looks? Of course I can. If you pay me 250k a year, I will come up with 100 looks. Trust me. I don't think it's that hard to come up with 54 looks. I mean, design teams do it all the time. Like creative directors do it multiple times a year, and they design and do other things, and they have to make all the looks for their runway shows. And some of them have like 6 runway shows a year. So I'm very sure it's more than possible. If not, it's not that hard. It's actually not that hard, to be honest. If that's like your full-time job, like that's your actual job to be a stylist, like an in-house stylist, that's not hard at all. There are much harder jobs to do in this world than come up with 54 looks, I can assure you. Especially when it will be easy for you to pull a lot of looks that you want from a lot of luxury brands, because you're using the infrastructure of a sports team, and you're using the cachet and social media following of the athletes that you are styling. So yeah. MLB baseball players need it. MLB players don't really have outside endorsements, or at least not as much as the NBA. Yeah, for sure. So tennis players have a lot of endorsements, but they're not seen as like fashion icons. But a lot of tennis players have like watch endorsements, like Rolex and like Hublot and Tag Heuer and stuff like that. And they normally have like a sportswear sponsor, so like a Nike. Some of them do like Lacoste or whatever. And that kind of informs. So when they have, like, I remember when Serena Williams was like signed with Nike, so she would do like all the off-white stuff. So that's kind of where the tennis players do, but they could do more with the tennis players for sure. They could definitely do more with the tennis players. Jennifer said you could do it in your sleep. No, I think I could. I think it would be hard for NFL because the men are huge. They're wide as hell. You would just figure out what brands work for those kind of athletes. Like if that's your full-time job, eventually you'll just kind of know what brands cater to like wider, broader athletes, and then you'll kind of have like a good list. And then also you would have like feedback from your athletes as to what brands do they like and what brands do they wear. It's kind of like a collaborative effort in a way. I don't see how you could dress them baseball players. Damn. You guys don't have any faith in the in the baseball players. No faith. NBA has 82 games per season. I could do the NBA. The NBA has what? 12 players, 12 to 15 players on a roster, and 82 games a season. So I have to come up with 15 looks every couple of days. That's not that hard, honestly. Maybe because I work in the fashion industry, because like I've styled some things. I have friends that have been stylists for really long. They have to do more than that. Like they're on the shoot styling every day, and they have to. Most of them do like if not every other day, and most of them do like loads of looks. Like some of them on Monday, they're styling like a H&M shoot. That H&M shoot, they're literally shooting like 100 looks. And then the next day they have to do like I don't know, it might be a luxury brand, it might be like a Dior shoot. And then they're styling like another 20. It's really not that hard, you know. Like someone that does styling at a high level full time in the fashion industry would be a cakewalk to get paid loads of money to style athletes, to be very honest. Like they would be like, what? Sign me up. But anyway, let's read on, guys. Miller also emphasizes that teams need to treat fashion with the same strategic intent as other commercial initiatives. I would hope they would do that. Because it's big money. It would be stupid for them not to. But reading on, one of the biggest things that I've spoken about in sports, both in Europe and the US, is that a lot of their partnerships or initiatives, as they relate to fashion, can seem haphazard without a strategy. Continues. Hiring stylists can help build a collective strategy, which helps not just one or two players in the team, but the team overall. I think that's probably because the average person still sees fashion as like a thing that's frivolous, because they don't understand that fashion is like big money, like billions and billions and trillions of dollars worldwide. So they don't understand how much money they gain to make from being aligned with the fashion industry, because people always perceive maybe like working with a watch brand as like a better thing, but fashion brands, like realistically, a lot of fashion brands that are tied to fashion conglomerates have way more money than these like independent watch brands that are like respected, but they don't have that much money. And also the conglomerates that own a lot of these watches anyway, like if we're talking about like Richemont or even talking about LVMH, they have all the money. So why wouldn't you treat the fashion partnerships with the same respect that you would the watch ones, when actually the fashion brands make more revenue than a lot of the watch companies? Like, let me see, what is Rolex 2024 revenue? I'm just curious. I'm so curious. In dollars. So apparently Rolex in 2024 made $10.5 billion. So already Louis Vuitton makes more money than that. So like, once again, you need to treat partnerships with the same respect as you would these watch companies, because a lot of these fashion brands make more money than some of the companies that people think are like so huge. Yeah, but I could see the NFL players groveling over Audemars or Richard Mille. Yeah, true, but they just need to broaden their horizons, to be honest, if they want to get into the upper echelon of the fashion space and make more money. Because they can do the watch and the fashion endorsements. I think it's in their best interest. Dressing nice isn't frivolous. Only men think it is. I don't think dressing nice is frivolous at all. I'm just saying that the general like consensus around like the average person just thinks that as a man, why do you care about the way you look? Which is so stupid, but a lot of guys are like that. Like I meet so many people like that. I even have friends that think like that. Like friends that I've made from being on sports teams and stuff. Some of them think like that. So yeah, interesting story. Interesting to see how the fashion and sports space has developed over the years and how it's going to continue to develop as time progresses. I'm very curious to see how exactly they do their job, like a lot of these in-house creative directors, and how they roll out these things. I think is very interesting, and I think it's long overdue. I'm so surprised that they're only doing this now. It's like crazy, actually, that they're only doing this now. So yeah, that's kind of it. And the last but not least, guys, the last topic I wanted to cover today is this, because I find it quite hilarious. Shout out to Jose, who I'm a fan of. So Jose has this article that I found really interesting. I saw him post about it on Instagram, and it's why is everything in fashion suddenly a recession indicator, which I found so funny because on TikTok, I am so exhausted of people trying to come across smarter than they are by having these bogus takes on, like, normally at a time of recession, the hems of socks start to go lower, and you see that the trouser hems go higher, and therefore the sleeves go shorter, and you tend to see that people no longer wear double-breasted, they wear single-breasted blazers. And due to my analysis, you see that people wear the color red, not green, because the color red is associated with solidarity. When you look at the British poppy, it comes from those associations, and they just start waffling about, like, just trying to seem so intellectual, and it's like, you are literally waffling. So when I saw this article, that was the first thing that came to mind, because I find it really hilarious when people try to do that all the time. But I'm curious to see what Jose has to say about this specific topic. So I didn't actually want to read it until I came on stream, so I could react to it live. But let's see what Jose says. Peplum top, skinny jeans, and a return of indie sleaze aren't just cyclical trends, but signs of an economic slump, if the internet is to be believed. A few days into Paris Fashion Week, a friend and a fellow editor texted me, "The return of business casual to the club is a recession indicator. Is it true? Can we deduce that the state of the US economy based on the return of blazers to bar life? Online, signs of a recession are everywhere, and a commentariat is to be believed. Peplum tops, indie sleeves, skinny jeans, and skinny scarves apparently all indicates an economic slump. As is common with internet speak, it might have gone too far. Can everything from Lady Gaga's return to form on Mayhem to boho chic and an upcoming Suits reboot really be recession indicators? Or is it just the latest spin on our ongoing obsession with nostalgia, a social media quip to show one's commentary is more highbrow and informed than the next? In fashion, what exactly indicates a recession? So I think a lot of it is this, basically what Jose has written, a social media quip to show one's commentary is more highbrow and informed than the next. I think sometimes when people run out of, like, content types and they're trying to, like, come across like, yeah, I'm like the all-knowing fashion person, they start, like, making bogus claims, and I see it all the time. But let's start. Non-starters. One could argue, if one is imaginative and humorous enough, that is, that slim silhouettes like the skinny jean can mark a looming recession due to the mere fact that they use less fabric. I've definitely seen that point being made. However, the difference in having a straight leg jean or a skinny jean in fabric is not significant enough for it to be like a whole ass economic downturn indicator. Like, it can't be a recession indicator. But let's read on. Or that the style cognoscenti re-embracing indie sleaze elements is a brand of nostalgia that indeed takes us back to the times before and immediately following the 2008 financial crisis. But for the most part, these are mere examples of fashion cyclicality. Slim silhouettes being back on the runways are a classic case of a swinging pendulum. Things got too wide, as oversized as they could. Designers take this not as a challenge, so now you must go elsewhere. That's true, because everything got so oversized that it started to become comical, like just stupidly oversized. Like, it's kind of like Justin Bieber core. Like, Justin Bieber loves wearing those, like, crazy oversized things, right? And it's like, when we were wearing skinny jeans during a swag era in 2011 and 2012 and 2010, 2009, was that a recession indicator then? So why is it now? But anyway, reading on. Slim silhouettes being back on the runways are a classic case of swinging the pendulum. Things got too wide, as oversized as they could, so now we must go elsewhere. And indie sleaze, that's just the case of a generation of fashion lovers who are too young to partake in its first wave, having the opportunity to do so now. Another instance of this would be the enthusiasm for boho chic, fueled by Chimene Kamani's Chloe debut last year. That's also true, because the boho chic that people are trying to like recreate. They're talking about like Stella McCartney at Chloe, Phoebe Philo at Chloe. A lot of people weren't alive then, or definitely weren't consuming fashion during those moments. So they kind of want to buy into it and kind of relive that now that Chimena Kamali is at Chloe and doing the aesthetic. So that's definitely true. So what's inspired your outfit today? Well, it's a recession. That's funny. Skinny silhouette is because it's less fabric, meaning less expensive. But not really though, because less expensive for the brand, but not less expensive for the consumer. So my understanding of something that would be a recession indicator is consumer spending and consumer habits changing based on price. Skinny jeans are not cheaper than straight leg jeans. Every brand offers every cut of jeans at the same price, regardless of which one uses more or less fabric. So that's why I don't think it's a good argument to say that people wearing skinny jeans is like a recession indicator. Unless like skinny jeans were cheaper, then that would make sense. But reading on, rather, what happens when we take these popular internet phrases and shoehorn them into describing today's trends is that we more often than not lose valuable hindsight, the kind that makes trend reporting such an alchemical yet accurate science. We used to be able to look back at fashion and recognize its patterns as either nothing more than returning trend or as markers of broader cultural stories when the evidence presented them as such. It's almost as if now we are unable or uninterested in taking in the big picture. Jose is absolutely cooking. And this is why I'm a fan of Jose as a journalist and just a fan of his writing, because he's cooking. He's really, really cooking right now. But reading on. The quick hits of discussing fashion based on internet talking points du jour make for entertaining social media discourse, but calling anything and everything a recession indicator, or to look at last week's column, a case of nacho reheating, flattens much of the cultural and historical context attached to fashion. Take the case of the peplums. We could call them a recession indicator to be funny, surely, but they actually tend to come back in style after moments of crisis. One of the most famous peplum shapes in fashion history is Christian Dior's new look jacket, which came after World War II. And yes, most fashion conversations, including this one, happening online, but that doesn't mean we should forego fashion literacy for the sake of a fun joke. And then, okay, Jose is going to talk about the real markers, so this should be interesting, and this should be very, very spicy. What we can't ignore, however, is that some economic indicators are indeed raising red flags at the moment. A recent Deutsche Bank survey points to a 43% chance that the United States is headed for a recession. Oh yeah, that's to do with like the tariffs and so many other things. Yeah, the last time the US entered a recession period, other than the aftermath of the pandemic, was once again in 2008. An era in fashion collectively remembered primarily for two things. For insiders, there was the arrival of Phoebe Philo at Celine, which swiftly became a dominating agenda-setting force that defined much of the past decade and a half in fashion, whether by designers emulating her aesthetic or by her acolytes going on to design for major labels Daniel Lee first at Bottega Veneta, and now Burberry, Peter Doe, and Rock Hwang of Rock are a few that spring to mind. Philo's singular brand of minimalism was appropriate for the moment, at a time which luxury went quiet as affluent consumers embraced a more subdued look, attuned to the economic hardships of the time. Glaring and unabashed displays of wealth were swift no-go. And that's true. So that is one recession indicator that always happens. Like at a time of recession, people wear clothing that is less outwardly ostentatious because it's seen as being in poor taste to kind of flaunt your wealth during a recession. That always happens. That's been happening all the way back since the French Revolution, when literally the aristocrats in France were dressing like poor people, because if they were visibly seen as an aristocrat, they would be killed. So this is something that has happened since the beginning of time, and it will continue to happen. So that definitely is a more accurate thing. And so I think that the whole minimalism thing definitely is a thing that happens during recession, where people don't want to, throw wealth and be really ostentatious about their wealth during a time of recession. That definitely is true. That happens. That happens for sure. Let's read on. Sound familiar? Quite luxury as an aesthetic online and in pop culture. Oh yeah, I just talked about that. Quite luxury as an aesthetic online and in pop culture. See the well-timed final season of Succession would, in hindsight, be more of an early harbinger for a possible impending recession than, say, Chalamet's skinny scarf. What Quite Luxury promotes is a homogenized look that is subtle, logoless, and easy to partake in. That its styling components could be the Row and Loro Piana or COS and Uniqlo was the commercial effect of this consumer trend on TikTok that made way for the return of more brands, as I outlined late last year. That also, quick side note, but that also has served as the bedrock for how a lot of fast fashion brands are rebranding. I've talked about this before, but a lot of fast fashion brands are kind of, they know they can't compete with Shein and Temu, so they can't do the whole race to the bottom thing. So now they're all collaborating with luxury brands, collaborating with luxury designers, doing capsule collections with luxury designers, hiring luxury designers as creative directors. Case in point, Claire White Keller at Uniqlo, being the creative director of Uniqlo. Um, so that's kind of how it's happening, and all of them are kind of rebranding in that sort of quite luxury way, even all the way down to Pretty Little Thing, which I obviously bashed not too long ago. So we're definitely seeing that across the industry. But reading on, more broadly, what this era in fashion is remembered for is the popularization of business casual as a look to wear both to the office and to the club. The first half of the 2010s were, after all, the time in which millennials would step into the party scene wearing tailored vests, peplum tops, blazers, and slacks. That this was the going out look trend then had much to do with people. The fact that during and immediately after the recession, people were less willing to invest in clothes for different occasions and rather spent more on a more versatile wardrobe. Well, yeah, because, okay, the last main recession, I think Jose said, was in 2008, but there have been other like recessions, not as big as 2008, but I would say that COVID was definitely a recession. And that's why quiet luxury became a thing also during like the COVID time, because people and brands and even designers used to talk about this. I remember Alessandro Sartori, when he was talking about his Xenia collections, always used to say that, people need more versatile clothing during the COVID times, and people aren't really investing like all these crazy things because they need things that they can wear at home and lounge, but also feel nice in and then wear in Zoom meetings. So I think that was one of the big pushes for the whole quiet luxury thing expanding and exploding. So I don't think we need to go all the way back to 2008 and 2010 to see these indicators. I think we can see it as recently as the COVID pandemic, to be honest. But reading on, this was the going outlook that had much to do with the fact that during and immediately after the recession, people were less willing to invest in clothes for different occasions and rather spent on a more versatile wardrobe. That the 10 a.m. meeting outfit became the 10 p.m. club look is, in hindsight, a hilarious consequence of recession-era consumer trends that is now immortalized in many Facebook photo albums. Pretty Little Thing rebranding from a youthful party brand to a business casual label, recession indicator. Okay, so he ended up mentioning the Pretty Little thing. I didn't even realize he was going to, but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, office siren. Recession is back-to-back quarters of negative GDP. The COVID era reflected slob style. Interesting. I thought sweats and workout attire that will never be used how they're supposed to be used are signs of a recession, not places. Not really. I think now just general trends. In general, people dress more casually. Like if you see those videos of like, let me show you guys those like YouTube videos I always see where it's like London in the 1980s, and you see how everyone is literally wearing a suit. You'll see that. I think just in general, I don't think those things can be recession indicators, because just in general, people just dressed a bit more less casual back in the day. Um, So you always see like these like videos like this, for example, you always see them on YouTube popping up where it's like London in the 1980s. Like look at how so many people wearing suits, people smart casual, like he's wearing a blue backpack where he's got like a suit and stuff. So you actually notice that just in general, we dress more casually these days. So you can't really use like casual clothing, like sportswear used casually as a recession indicator anymore because people don't really try with their fashion anymore. Like the average person I'm talking about. They don't really put too much effort into it. Yes, this is Oxford Street, by the way. This is Oxford Street. It is Oxford Street. It very much is. We can look at other parts like London in the 1980s, like because they have loads of those. Like this is London. I see them all the way, and then you have like, there's always those people in the chat that are like, "This is the real London before we let the immigrants in." And those same people that say this is the real London before we let the immigrants in, they don't wear suits. Like they don't dress nice. um okay, let's skip. I want to see what people are wearing. Overcoat. We need to see what the people are. I don't want to see the nights. I want to see the streets. Okay, this is not giving us what we want. Also, AP is gonna demonetize my channel, by the way. They love doing that. Oh well. I was just making a point. Earlier this month in Paris, Stella McCartney said the theme of her Autumn Winter 25 collection was from laptop to lap dance. McCartney was making a point about women existing both in the workplace and outside of it, timed to the reacquisition of her own name and label. Yeah, that was the famous Stella McCartney collection where it was like it did all the rage on TikTok. People are filming like, oh, it's like we're in an office in the Stella McCartney show. We're in an office, but let's see what else. Jose said, "Yet the look on the runway, an 80s working girl meets 2020's oversized blazer wearing millennial office worker, revived this same business casual to the club look from 15 years ago. McCartney wasn't alone. Iterations of the corporate garb were one of the season's biggest trends, according to my Vogue colleague, Laird Borelli Person. Dylan Cow and Jin Kay of Commission were also thinking of both the corporate office and the underground rave as settings for their collection. And designers from Ashland Park in New York to Simone Bellotti at Bali in Milan reconsidered the peplum as both a sophisticated sportswear element and subversive, can't even speak, and a subversive yet equally dressy, punkish wardrobe twist. So that's interesting. The jury is still out on whether we will or will not reach a recession in 2025, but fashion is perhaps even inadvertently preparing itself for its effect on consumer habits. Brands have also been dealing with the consequences of the luxury downturn. The takeaway is that even if these shifts in collective style are not always indicative of macroeconomic tendencies, they do indicate what happens in the industry. The rise of TikTok's office siren aesthetic. Oh, God. We just had to mention it. We just had to. We're not saying much about the future of the US economy, but it certainly contextualizes a collective sartorial anxiety in regards to how to dress and what to spend money on. Great article from Jose. I think that he was absolutely cooking with that article for sure. But yeah, let's go on TikTok and look at some of these office siren things. Let's have a look. I do find it kind of tiring at this point that on TikTok every single day there's a new aesthetic. It's like, don't people just actually like want to, just dress how they want to dress? Why is it every day a new aesthetic that they're pushing? It's just like, don't these people get tired? Yeah, we're gonna mute that music just in case, but this is what we're doing with the office siren look. Not someone saying low GDP core. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. I think what I find the strangest about all these aesthetics, there are genuinely people that see this aesthetic on TikTok and change their whole wardrobe to try and like be an office siren. Also, do you know what's been more funny than anything else? Let me show you what I find the funniest thing about the office siren. Have you guys seen those TikToks of people being like, I tried the office siren aesthetics on my first day at work and I got fired? And I'm just like, what makes you think that you can dress like that in a corporate space? Like, I think dressing anyway is fine, but certain spaces you have to, there's like a uniform in certain spaces. It's like being a fireman or firewoman and not wearing like fire protective jackets. Like, you're gonna get burnt. So it's the same thing in a corporate space. It's like an unspoken uniform, and if you break that, obviously you're gonna get fired. Like these TikTokers, like, I tried the office siren aesthetic and I got fired from my job. Let me see if I can find those. Office siren fired from job. There's so many of them. Um okay, here we go. Here we go. Let's see. So the thing about this outfit is there's not really an issue with it. Like, generally, like, you can dress like that. But in a corporate space, though, if you want to work in a corporate space, you cannot go to the office of a corporate job just like that. Like, anyone, to be honest, anyone with common sense knows that you can't dress like that in a corporate space. Like, let's be for real. Let's be for damn real. You cannot dress like that in a corporate space. Like, unless you're just being stupid, to be very honest. Unless you just want to lose your job. Like, so if we're going to be honest. But let's continue watching. Okay, so she has a lack of self-awareness because she doesn't see what the issue is and why, like, her boss, who's also a woman, basically was like, oh, it's not suitable work attire. Um, so yeah, strange, strange. Oh, you guys are saying you can't hear her, really? Why can't you guys hear her? That's odd. Let me see if I can fix that. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me play it from the back. I think it was muted. Let me play it from the back.
But I got fired on the first day at my new job, all because of an outfit that I wore. I've always resonated with the saying, look good, feel good. So I just wanted to look pretty so that I could feel confident and give a good first impression, but clearly that backfired. If you guys missed my video, this is the outfit that I wore. Here's a close up. As soon as I walked into work, my boss, who, keep in mind, I barely know because I'm new, calls me over, and I got so excited and literally ran up to her because I thought she was going to compliment my outfit. But she basically started berating me and telling me how inappropriate my outfit was for work and that I needed to change. And I felt really insulted. So I stood up for myself. I was respectful.
Yeah, so that's what I was reacting to. Basically, I was saying that two things, kind of what you guys are alluding to in the chat. She's either fishing for content and just doing it to try and make a viral video, and if that's the case, it worked. But if she's being serious, like if she genuinely actually like lost her corporate job and got fired for wearing that, then that's insane. Like, the lack of self-awareness is like scary. But like, this is like a new TikTok trend, by the way. Like, apart from the office siren thing being an aesthetic, I've seen loads of videos of like, I tried the office siren look and got fired from my corporate job. Like, I've seen that on TikTok a lot.
respectful, but I did tell her that I've been through it with envious females. I'm used to females being super jealous of me and that I can sense her insecurity and that my outfit wasn't going to affect the way that I perform at my job. She essentially told me to go home and not come back. I've just been feeling very distraught and traumatized, especially because they were only paying me $200,000 a year. So I assumed that they would not enforce a dress code and they would allow me to express myself with the way that I dress, but clearly I was wrong, so now I'm sad and unemployed. So this is awkward, but I got fired on the
But
first.
yeah, this is not. There have been loads of viral ones that have gone crazy. Let me see what her other content is like. 1 second. To be fair, she's already famous on TikTok, so maybe she's trolling. Because I feel like if you have 1.7 million followers on TikTok, do you need a corporate job also? I mean, you can get one, but I feel like she has enough followers to just like live on, live off of her income. So she's definitely trolling. But it's something that I've seen, like office siren fired from job. Let's see, office siren fired from job. Um, so it's almost become like a trend to say I got fired from my job as an office siren.
I just got home from a job interview. They told me that I'm not going to get the job because of my outfit.
Okay, she must be trolling because at corporate jobs, people are content farming. But I wanted to bring this up because this is obviously how the trend became like a big thing, like the office siren as an aesthetic became big. It's through videos like this, like all these videos of like, I lost my job, like dressing like an office siren. Well, obviously she's trolling because at a corporate job, they don't actually most times give you the reason why you don't get the job. Also, at corporate jobs, they don't tell you there and then that you didn't get the job. You normally go in for an interview and then they have to like see everyone's application. They have to, speak between each other, and then they decide after who exactly gets the job. So anyone that says they told me I'm not getting a job because I'm how I'm dressed, then they don't even do that. They'll just look at you weirdly, and then you have your interview. They'll ask you questions, and then when you go, they'll just cross your name off the list. But they're not going to tell you. That rarely happens, if ever. That literally never happens. If they'll just like speed run your interview because they know they're not going to hire you, but they won't tell you why. That's not how it happens. So yeah, guys, that's the office siren in the office siren era for you. That's kind of what we're dealing with. And of course, as people have said, Stella McCartney's new collection is kind of challenging that in a way. So what do you guys think? We don't think you're a good fit for our corporate structure. You know those ones. You're not a good company fit. This is true. There's an appropriately dressed office workers like now that still got a job. That's how you know they're lying. Facts. Right. I hate the videos that are like me walking sexily by your desk and shoving my butt up your face to pick up a pencil on the floor. I don't think I've seen those videos. Mind you, these are people those journalists are looking at before they wrote those articles. What are you talking about when they're like, oh, it's a recession indicator? That is quite funny, to be fair. That is really funny. Oh gosh. No, TikTok is not a real place. I agree. I concur. It definitely isn't a real place. Yeah, this is a cool. I should maybe start talking about Stella McCartney or not. I have a bone to pick with Stella McCartney, but I'll talk about that another day. Actually, fuck it. I'll tell you guys. So, I had a brief stint where I worked at. I'll just tell you. I have a brief stint when I worked for Stella McCartney, right? And this was years ago. Oh my god, I'm like 27 now. This is like when I was 18, quite a while ago. And when so was it 3 or 4 years ago when I was still at CSM? I was featured in Vogue Business, and a lot of brands reached out to me because they started learning about who I was based on Vogue Business. And someone from Stella McCartney reached out to me, and she basically saw my LinkedIn, and she was like, "Oh, I see from your LinkedIn that you used to work at Stella McCartney. When was it that you worked there?" And like, by the way, I'm aware who this person is. So I was like, damn. Was I that irrelevant? So since then, I'm just like, nah, fuck it. I don't talk about Stella McCartney. They invite me to every show. Ever since that Vogue Business article, they've invited me to every show, and I've not attended one. They even invited me to this show. I've not attended one, because it just shows that you don't value your staff, that they just did not even know who I was, or like when I was there and all that. So I genuinely have erased my time at Stella McCartney from everything, from my LinkedIn, from my resume, from like, it's just a thing that people know I did. But like, if I apply anywhere or whatever, if I talk about jobs that I've done in fashion moving forward, like in terms of interviews, I'm just going to act like I never worked for Stella McCartney, like ever. So yeah, that's my bone to pick. That's why I rarely talk about the brand, to be honest. Oh, and he said you shared this before. Yeah, but people don't know. People don't know. You're a regular. That's why you know the story. But like, guys in the chat, how many of you knew that story before? How many of you were aware of that Stella McCartney story? But yeah, I don't. Based on that thing, also, I don't think I'm ever going to go to a Stella McCartney runaway show. To be very honest with you, like, they're going to invite me constantly, and I'm never going to go. Like, no joke. Unless I change my mind about the whole thing and I get over it. But I'm just like, damn, like, everyone that, like, anywhere that I've been like in a position of power, I remember every single person that worked for me. I just find it crazy. Okay, everyone's saying they didn't know. Would you say Stella McCartney clocked your tea? I mean, the thing is, I didn't actually work with Stella McCartney herself. She definitely wouldn't know who I was. That's fine. But it's certain members of the team that I expected to know who I was because I worked with them. And then also, they keep telling me that, oh, you should come to the show. Stella McCartney wants to meet you. I also don't want a case where I meet Stella McCartney and they try to run this narrative where, like, yeah, we created him. Like, he worked here. It's like, no, don't take credit. That's one big reason why I'm like avoiding the brand like the plague, because I was barely there. I barely worked there. I worked there during a summer and that was it. So like, I don't want this narrative where it's like, yeah, we made him. And it's like that every other brand I worked for way longer. Thank you for the super chat, Culture. Petty King. That's funny. That's funny. So it's not an indictment on Stella. It's nothing to do with Stella McCartney. I don't have any issues with Stella McCartney herself. It's more members of her team. I just thought that was crazy to me. It was insane, to be honest. Insane. So that's my little Stella McCartney lore. That's why I don't talk about Stella McCartney. And that's why I don't go to their shows, even though I get invited every season. It'll be so jokes if the PR sees this and they're going to be scrambling like, oh no. It's not going to change my opinions. If they try to send me some shit or try to work with me, it's not going to change my opinion on the brand. It's forever tainted in my mind. Is she a top 10 brand on the list? I never really paid attention to the brand. Top 10 in what regard? I think Stella McCartney is like a legendary designer solely because of her tenure at Chloe and how much she influenced Phoebe Philo, and Phoebe Philo used a lot of that understanding to become one of the most influential designers of our time. So just based on that, I think that Stella McCartney definitely deserves her credit in that regard. I think that Stella McCartney is known as the woman that, like, you know, is the bastion of sustainability. I think that it's overstated. They make it seem like she literally created sustainability in fashion. I think they overstate that a lot of times, but I think she's an iconic designer. I think she deserves her flowers for sure. And that shows you I'm not biased. Even though I have a bone to pick with the brand, I can still tell you that Stella McCartney is a legend, and her tenure at Chloe was legendary for sure. So yeah. Stella's just trying to get her groove back. But yeah, this was like a good show for Stella McCartney. There was like very much like, because I haven't seen a lot of discourse around Stella McCartney shows in recent times, but this was definitely one of the shows where like people are really speaking about it. So yeah, kudos to the team. Kudos to the team. I also will say I've always loved the Stella McCartney logo, by the way, because a lot of brands' logos are really like boring and all of them use the same like sans serif font. I've always enjoyed that sort of like, it looks like light bulbs kind of arranged, or like, I like that. Luke, stop forcing this term like clock the T. Stop forcing it. I know you don't say that. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for coming to my 3.5 hour long TED Talk. This was really fun. I shall see you in the next stream. But before I go, turn on your YouTube notification bell so you know when next I am live, so you get notified. Or actually, if you follow me on Twitch, this is kind of like my crafty way of getting you to follow me on Twitch. But if you follow me on Twitch, Twitch is really good with sending notifications, way better than YouTube. So you'll get an email immediately I go live via Twitch. So if you follow me on Twitch, even if you don't tune in on Twitch, just to get the email, I will also appreciate that. So thank you very much, and I shall be seeing you guys